This meeting is being recorded.
We are still in Suzanne, will you hit broadcast for us and see what happens? Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 6th Annual Disability Summit. We are now live and the summit is now recording. The Disability Summit focuses on reasonable accommodations and socialization in a virtual world. And we are fortunate to have a wide range of engaging speakers here for you all today. My name is Moss Lynch. I'm the Assistant Director for Training and Communication at the Massachusetts Office on Disability, and I will be your host for today's events. The Massachusetts Office on Disability Summit began in 2015 and is designed to bring together and inspire leaders, advocates, and others from the disability community. Please refer to our chat where you will find the link to the cart, our slides, our program, and a link to the attendee support document. We do have closed captioning turned on. At the bottom of your screen, you may click the closed captioning option and turn on the captions. We will not be taking live questions today during our events, but you can submit a question for your presenters at any time in the question and answer feature at the bottom of your screen. Please click on the question and answer option. We ask that you provide your name, your phone number, email address, and state which presenter your question is for. We will then get your question to that presenter and we will follow up with you after the summit. So to begin today's program, our first speaker is the Secretary for the Executive Office of Administration and Finance, Michael Heffernan. He is here to give us his opening remarks for the summit. Thank you, Secretary Heffernan, for being here today, and I'll turn it now over to you.
Thank you, Moss, and good morning, everyone. It is great to be with you all, and I appreciate the opportunity to once again kick off this wonderful event. I would like to first recognize and thank wholeheartedly Mary and her dedicated team at the Massachusetts Office of Disability for hosting this event and for the important work they do every day. Your efforts to ensure that people with disabilities can equally participate and, more importantly, thrive in all aspects of life in Massachusetts are incredibly inspiring. I would also like to thank all of you for your efforts and support, especially given the new hardships caused by the COVID-19 pandemic over the past year. We know that individuals with disabilities have faced unique challenges as a result of this public health emergency. This includes difficulties arising from social distancing and limited interactions with loved ones and colleagues. This, as well as the challenges of accessing or using telehealth or virtual tools and fewer opportunities to receive healthcare. But the Baker-Polito administration recognizes that it is critically important to continue investing in supports for individuals with disabilities during this crucial time. For example, during the height of the pandemic in April of 2020, we announced a nearly $140 million increase in funding for health and human service providers. This includes residential and congregate care. Much of this funding flowed through the Department of Developmental Services and helped support increased staffing, enhanced infection control procedures, and PPE. Additionally, last summer we announced over $16 million in funding for special education residential school providers to support costs related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And throughout this pandemic, special education residential schools remained open to support their students with their unique challenges. These resources also help support PPP, infection control measures, increased staffing costs, and enhanced cleaning protocols. We also recently filed our budget proposal for fiscal year 2022, which begins on July 1st. This budget recommendation includes significant funding in several key areas to help support the disability community as we move forward. One particularly exciting initiative is our proposal to create a new disability employment tax credit to encourage businesses to hire individuals with disabilities. This credit would help further out our commitment to improving employment opportunities and economic security for individuals with disabilities. Our budget proposal also continues strong support for the Massachusetts Office on Disability with an investment of over $869,000. This is an increase of nearly 25% since the 2019 budget, a clear recognition of the meaningful role of MOD and the excellent work that they do every day, every part of the year. Our budget recommendation also includes $7.2 million in total funding for the Massachusetts Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. This investment includes support for their initiative to expand access to American Sign Language interpreters. Also notable in our proposal is funding across various agencies including the Executive Office of Health and Human Services and the Massachusetts Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing to expand the production of vlogs in American Sign Language and increase communication access to public services for individuals who are deaf and hard of hearing. I would also like to highlight the fact that our proposal funds the Turning 22 program across state government for the 5th consecutive year. This will support a class of over 1,200 young adults and continue the administration's commitment to fully support a program that was underfunded for, we believe, nearly 3 decades. Our budget recommendation includes nearly $134 million to annualize Chapter 257 adult long-term residential rate increases. These rate increases support approximately 100 private providers operating over 2,200 24/7 group homes across the Commonwealth, which serve over 7,700 individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Additionally, our budget proposal provides $67.6 million in funding for the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission and $25.6 million in funding for the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind. In closing, I would just like to thank you again for your efforts to support the disability community. It is truly fantastic to see such a committed and inspired group of leaders come together to collaborate and share ideas. I look forward to seeing the results of this summit and how they will benefit the people and communities throughout Massachusetts. Thank you. And as Mary mentioned and Moss mentioned, please feel free to reach out to me or our team at A&F with any questions. And again, we are honored and humbled by the good work that you do every day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary. We appreciate your time. Here also to give some opening remarks is Mary Mahan McCauley. Please turn on your camera. Mary is our Executive Director and fearless leader of the Massachusetts Office on Disability, and she's also here to give her opening remarks. I'd like to now turn it over to you, Mary.
Thank you very much, Moss. And thank you, Secretary Heffernan, for those kind words and all of your support for the Massachusetts Office on Disability. I'm glad that we're starting out with sharing some of the positive things that are happening moving forward for the disability community in Massachusetts. Today's focus on today's, excuse me, I'm sorry. I guess I'm a little nervous. So let me just say that because that's going to help me just let go of it. So the theme for today is socialization in a virtual world. And although this pandemic has been extremely difficult and challenging for so many people, the past year has been so difficult for all of us. There have been problems in many areas, including the accentuation of social and barriers and difficulties among various marginalized populations, including people of color and people with disabilities. Those things are real. Those things have been tough and challenging, but I'd like to talk about some of the positive things that are also true that have happened as a result of the pandemic. I think the pandemic has pushed us to use more of our advanced technology. The technology that we have has been around for quite a while, 2018, 2019, and before that. But I think with many things, human beings have to be forced to use things before they begin to really set them up and get involved with them. With the technology, there's been more virtual meetings and conferences and events because we've had to do that and get away due to the social distancing. We've had to have more virtual activities. Because of having more virtual activities, people with disabilities have been able to join in more. The challenges of transportation and other impediments towards social engagement have been reduced because of the virtual connection that people can make. And so individuals can join more in a variety of things. And people with disabilities that had transportation issues, as well as all other types of issues, just getting out and getting to places, can be involved with going to their doctor's appointments, with taking classes online, being involved and being very, engaged in employment activities, being productive within society. And those things are so very important. And the increase is great. A lot of our speakers are going to talk specifically about the areas that have been increased with the involvement that we've been able to do. And I think that really has been more positive. It's a positive change among all the negative things and the difficult things that have happened. I like to focus on the positive adjustments, the positive changes that we can look forward to. Although I'm really looking forward to being around people. I'm very much an extrovert and I miss being with people at events or at concerts or in work or anywhere, to tell you the truth. We're not going to stop connecting virtually. So at the same time that we can be more involved within the physical environment as spring comes and as vaccines increase, we'll always be able to also stay involved virtually. The employment rate for people with disabilities, I think, is going to increase due to that. And today we have wonderful speakers to share all of the things that this new virtual environment allows as far as an increase in all types of socialization. So although there's been difficulties, challenges, and barriers, and they're very, very real, today we're going to focus on the silver lining in the cloud and talk about the way that being virtual and connecting in social situations is really going to be, or is already, an asset to the disability community. I hope that everyone that's here today is able to leave this event with information that they did not have yesterday. I'm very excited that so many people have joined us. Other than the increase of information and knowledge, I hope by the end of the day that you've had an increased affinity with the disability community. Thank you very much for attending, and please stay for the whole day from 9 to 1. We have wonderful speakers. I wouldn't want anyone to drop off earlier than that because you'll miss out on some great stuff. Thank you very much. Back to you, Moss.
Thank you so much, Mary. And I'd like to give our interpreters a moment to switch. Our next presenter is Kobana Bani. You may prepare your presentation. Kobana is the program coordinator of Mass Match, and he is here today to present on assistive technology resources in the workplace and in our personal lives. Kobana? You may begin your presentation.
Thank you very much, Moss. And thank you, everyone. I take it you can hear me good and my video is on. Is that correct?
Yes, we just need you. You have one window
All
that's
right.
open over your presentation.
So thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Mary, and the folks at MOD for this opportunity. I always like this summit because of the opportunity it brings for folks in the disability community, especially. I know others come as well, but especially individuals with disabilities to be able to talk about, hear about, share our views about what is going on in the community. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity. My topic is going to be about assistive technology resources in our work and personal lives. And as Mary said, the pandemic has had a lot of negative effects on our lives, but it has also resulted in a lot of good things. And so hopefully my presentation will help talk about some of the things that have resulted, and especially the resources that are available to anyone that is an individual with a disability. So again, my name is Kobina Bonnie, and I coordinate the Mass Match program out of Mass Rehab Commission. So Mass Match is a program of the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission, and I'm the program coordinator. Now, so for my presentation, I'm going to touch on a few things. First, I'll touch on what we mean by assistive technology. I'll also talk a little bit about the role that assistive technology plays in our lives, both professionally and in our individual personal lives. I'll also talk about how and where one can get access to the assistive technology. After all, if we keep talking about assistive technology and how great it is, and you don't have access, well, it doesn't do you any good. So hopefully I'll share some information about how and where one can get that access. I'll also talk about the Mass Match program, a little more detail about the program, because a lot of people have never heard of Mass Match or have heard about it, but don't really remember what the program is. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And then the resources that the program offers. And lastly, I'll talk about some training opportunities that are available to folks all over the state. So right now, I have a couple of images on the screen, sort of representing various kinds of assistive technology devices. The question of what is assistive technology? So there's the official definition, which sort of focuses on systems that are either commercially produced or off the shelf that one can obtain and use to improve the life of a person with disability. That is official definition. There's a different definition, which I like to call the functional definition. And this one is one that was sort of, if you like, pulled together by what we call the 83 Center. Now, 83 is an organization that has a contract with the federal government to provide technical assistance to the assistive technology programs around the country. So this is their functional definition. I mean, any product or service. So they focus on the product and service that assists a person to be able to get the technology and be able to address their functional needs. So one, it talks about product and the service, but also talk about the functional need that the assistive technology is hopefully going to help address. And I like this definition best because of the focus on the functional need. Now, having said that, I also would like to let you know that personally, when I talk to people about assistive technology, I like to come up with a simple, basic definition, which is any technology that allows a person to be able to do what they would otherwise not be able to do. And of course, in this context, person, I'm thinking of a person with a disability. Now, I like to use that definition only because there are a lot of situations where I run into individuals who, for all kinds of reasons, don't think of themselves as people with disabilities. And so trying to bring up the word disability sometimes gets in the way. So much as I'm very proud of being a person with disability and always wanting to talk about it, I also am conscious of the fact that it can get in the way of some people. So I like to simplify it and just say any technology or service that allows a person with disability to be able to do things that they can not do otherwise. And it seems to help a lot in terms of definition. Now, there are all kinds of technologies out there that qualify as assistive technology. Now, many of them are specialized devices that people with disabilities can get and use. But there are also so many others that are designed for the general public, but with modifications here and there, adaptations, they come to be very useful for people with disabilities, and that has gone a long way. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the role of assistive technology in our personal lives. And here, I want to talk about the fact that it allows people to acquire education. So, education and skills. So, you think of someone who has a disability, whatever that is. It can be someone who's blind, and because of that, of course, they can read print, but they want to go to school. Well, there's technology out there, Braille, there's screen reader technology they can use. And because of that, they're able to acquire the education they want, acquire the skills they want. Now, someone who is physically disabled, who has to acquire education skills, the issue would be, well, how do I get to where I need to get to be able to acquire the skills or the education? It can be not getting there, but the physical effort that it takes to be able to do the things they have to do. So mobility becomes an issue. Well, with all kinds of technologies, they are able to, get to where they need to get to. And with other technologies, they're able to, excuse me 1 second. All right, so with other technologies, they are able to acquire the education and the skills, like I mentioned. Now, having acquired the skills and all the education, as it were, it enables people to able to get, hold jobs, and live successful lives. And that is very important. we all want to be productive in our community, in society. So being able to acquire skills, which then translate into getting and holding jobs, is very important. Then, of course, there's the part about our personal lives that assistive technology makes possible. Now, earlier on, Mary talked about some of the issues that have come up as a result of COVID-19 and the pandemic, which has limited social engagement in all kinds of ways. But then, because of the adoption of technology, and in this case, some of the tools that even all of us are using today, Zoom, which has been around for a while prior to the pandemic, but now has gained a lot of prominence. It's making it possible for a lot of us to be able to manage the things we need to manage, whether it's socialization, whether it's healthcare that we are able to get remotely, telemedicine as they call it. All of that is possible partly because of the use of assistive technology, because now the makers of these technologies have been forced to make their technology accessible. Now, assistive technology and access to assistive technology also makes it possible for us to live in the society, participate in our community, engage in all the different things that average people do in their lives. And it's not like we never did it before. That's not the case. It's simply the fact that assistive technology, especially under the present circumstances, is making it a lot easier. Of course, there are the downsides to the pandemic, and there are still limits to assistive technology. But I think all in all, it's becoming much easier, especially when it comes to the virtual world and the technology that we use to be able to participate. Now, there's also a lot to be said for being involved in non-work related activities, fun activities, entertainment, and other, recreational activities, which assistive technology also makes possible. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how you get access to the assistive technology. But I want to sort of stipulate that even as I'm going to talk generally about access to assistive technology, I also want to mention that sometimes it's not easy. And the reasons are varied. But then there are organizations. If you're a person with a disability, there are organizations in the Commonwealth that could help you. So I talk about the individual, and then depending on your particular situation, what organization may or may not be able to help you. So there's the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind, which provides assistive technology to individuals who are MCB consumers. There is the Massachusetts Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. It's also an organization that provides assistive technology services to their consumers. There is Massachusetts Department of Developmental Services. They also have an assistive technology program. There is the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission, which is where I work from. That's my agency, excuse me. And then, of course, there's Mass Match, which I listed last. Now, unlike the other organizations I mentioned earlier, all of which are able to provide assistive technology services, consumer qualifies to get services from those organizations or agencies. Mass Match is for the general public. Everyone, whether you're a person with disability or not, you can use the services or the offerings that MassMatch provides. And the reason is because MassMatch is a federally funded program and it's a statewide agency aimed at serving the general public. So, what is MassMatch? That's the question. Now, MassMatch stands for Massachusetts Maximizing Assistive Technology in Consumers' Hands. So it's the MASS, and then the match represents Maximizing Assistive Technology in Consumers' Hands. So it's the state's assistive technology program. In other words, MassMatch is a federally funded program, but then it's for everyone in the state. There are similar programs all over the country that they are all funded by the Assistive Technology Act, which is a federal law, and provides all kinds of resources to residents of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Now, the mission is to promote the use of assistive technology, service, products and services. And the whole focus of the program is to enhance the independence of people with disabilities so they can live in their community and succeed. Okay. The next question is, great. So you've told us about this MassMatch program. Now, what does it do? MassMatch does a lot of different things, but all of them, all the things that we do are aimed at giving people with disabilities, their family members, their friends, professionals, anybody at all, a chance to get access to, learn about assistive technology, and hopefully be able to allow folks with disabilities the ability to get the technology and be able to participate in all kinds of areas, even though the program focuses on education, community living, and employment. Okay, so that's the focus, to promote that awareness and access to enable everyone to be able to get the access that would then hopefully promote the kind of engagement in all of these areas, especially education, community living, and employment. So then we talk about what are those things, the specifics. So I've talked about promoting access, awareness, but how exactly do we do that? We do that in a lot of different ways. And so I want to take a few moments and talk about what these different activities are. Now, we divide up the things that we do into two kind of groups. There are what we call the core activities. In the eyes of the federal government, those are the state level activities. We promote AT or assistive technology reuse. Now, so basically allows people who have assistive technology that they don't need any longer a way to give it away or sell it, but all in all, make it available to others who need that technology, which happens for all kinds of reasons. Someone has a device and then either they get a new one or they decide that, okay, my situation has changed, this one doesn't work for me anymore, and they want to get rid of it, but not get rid of it as in pause it, all right? So it may be still functional, so you want to make it possible for someone else to get it. And that program allows for that to happen. We do a lot of different reuse activities. And by the way, I want to pause a second here and acknowledge our partners. So the work that Mass Match does, we do it in partnership with a lot of organizations across the Commonwealth. And so I want to acknowledge all our partners, and I apologize in advance if I don't mention that any of our partners, but I just want to acknowledge that there's, in the western part of the state, there's United Cerebral Palsy of Western Massachusetts, that's UCP of Western Massachusetts. We also have Easter Seals of Massachusetts, which runs 2 of our assistive technology regional centers. I'll talk about those in a few minutes. We also have Dme Recruitment. Recruitment is a program that's statewide, and they do the reuse program for us. And then a lot of other partners, independent living centers all over the state that also help us. And hopefully I'll mention some of them as I go along. But the reuse program, there are 2 main ones. One is a website, it's called Get AT Stuff. And that's a place where folks can go and list things they have, they want to sell, give away, etc. And then there is the recruitment program, Dme Recruitment, which also provides a lot of equipment that are being given away. Some of them are actually brand new. Okay, so when we say reuse, doesn't always mean something that has been used. Sometimes the equipment has never been used, but the person who's giving it away doesn't have use for it, and therefore they want to give it away. And we call that reuse. It doesn't mean the equipment is used. Now, we also have device demonstration centers. So these are places where anyone at all can go and get a device demonstrated for them. Why would you do that? Well, you do that because you may have heard of a device that you wonder, will this work for me, or would it work for my friend, family member, whatever it is? So you go there and you talk to the staff, and they show you, do a demonstration, and then you learn about the device or devices and make a decision whether you think it's worth trying out. And if you want to actually try out a device, you can also borrow a device. So in addition to a device demonstration, the same programs will provide device loans, short-term loans. And this gives the person a chance to actually go try out the device in their use environment, which can be your home, it can be your school, it can be in the workplace, hopefully to help you make an informed decision about the device that you've borrowed, whether it's going to be good for you or not. And all of these programs are free. How long are the device loans? They are for up to 30 days. It can be extended if you need to extend the loan. But this is a means to give people access to technology, to try it out. You don't want to go buy a piece of technology, assistive technology, only to find out, well, it doesn't really work for my situation. So by using the device demonstration and loan program, one, you get to learn about the device, you try it out in your use environment, and hopefully make an informed decision. Now, sometimes people borrow devices because their own device has broken down and they want to have one to use until the broken down device is fixed, or until they buy a new one or get a new one, and that's fine. Sometimes people borrow devices because they want to learn about the device. They simply want to learn about it, and you can do that. And as I said, the program is free. One other thing that we do is what we call the alternative finance program. Now, this one allows folks to borrow money if that's what they need to finance the purchase of assistive technology. But there are also other components to it. There is a mini loan program, for instance, which is a loan program. Yes, you're borrowing money, but it's zero interest. So if you need to borrow money to allow you to purchase assistive technology, you can use that program. It's a zero interest loan program. And then there's a third component to the alternative finance program, which is a long-term device loan program where we just provide the device for the person to use for as long as they need it. And you can get more information about all of these programs on the MassMatch website. Now, so those are the state level activities I just mentioned, and those are the core programs, but we do other things. One of which is what I'm doing right this minute. In other words, I'm here talking to you about MassMatch. That is the public awareness activities, talking about what it is we do, give the public a chance to learn about assistive technology, hopefully to take advantage of what exists, the resources, so that it will translate into more people having the access to the assistive technology they need to be able to function and live independently. We also provide training. Now, the trainings usually are for organizations of group of people, and they are about various topics. And the goal of the trainings is to increase awareness or the skill level for people to get a better understanding of what assistive technology is, and hopefully be able to result in more people knowing about assistive technology issues. For instance, issues about accessibility. Now, if you are the average person who doesn't have a person with a disability in your life, chances are that you don't really think about accessibility in the way people with disabilities do. So through our training activities, we make it possible for people to learn and hopefully, as a result, act in ways that result in more access for people with disabilities. And then we also provide technical assistance. Now, technical assistance usually is for organizations to be able to then promote, improve the access to their programs, policies, and the like. So we work with organizations. Say an organization wants to build a physical facility, a building, whatever it is. They've heard about, oh, you need to make your building accessible. Well, what does that mean? We can work with them and with our partners, help them figure out what are the things they need to do. There are the standards out there, but are you just going to read standards alone and not even think of working with people with disabilities to make sure what you are doing is right? So those are the kinds of things we do, work with organizations over a period of time to make their programs and services accessible in all the ways. For instance, web accessibility, right? We work on an organization to make sure their websites are accessible, et cetera, et cetera. And then lastly, we also provide information and assistance. This is more about answering people's questions. Someone calls us or emails us and asks questions about, what do I do about this or that situation? Where do I go to get this or that kind of resource? And we provide that information. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the ATRs. I want to be a little more sort of detailed about what those centers do. So I've already mentioned a couple of our partners who run the Assistive Technology Regional Centers for us, but I want to focus a little more. Why? Because these are what I call our main programs. So we do a whole bunch of things, but chances are that the way you interact with MassMatch is going to be through these three centers. So I want to talk a little bit more about the partners, the things we do, and hopefully give you more information. So the partners are Easter Seals of Massachusetts and United Cerebral Palsy of Western Massachusetts, UCP of Western Massachusetts. Now, these two partner organizations run 3 assistive technology regional centers for mass match. So this is a partnership between Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission, Mass Match, and these organizations, Easter Seals and UCP. Now, we have 3 centers, one in Pittsfield, which serves the western part of Massachusetts, and that's the one that UCP of Western Mass runs for us. There's a center in Worcester that serves folks in central Massachusetts. That center is run by Easter Seals of Massachusetts. And then there's a 3rd center in Boston. And that one is run for us by, again, Easter Seals of Massachusetts. Now, these places, centers, these are physical locations that you can go, you can visit. Hopefully when the pandemic is over and we all are able to get around, you can go and visit. All of you can make arrangements and go and visit. What do? They do pretty much everything I've mentioned. So if you heard about, read about some technology and you wondered, oh, how does this thing work? Well, you can contact them and talk to them, ask your questions. If you feel like, well, it sounds interesting, but I really want to see how it works, we can do that. That's a demonstration piece. If you know about the technology, but you want to borrow one to actually try out, you could do that as well. Now, the logo for the Assistive Technology Regional Centers has, if you like, a caption that says, see, touch, and try. Now, see because you want to see the technology, and that's where you do the demonstration, you see it, and they give you a hands-on experience with the technology, and then you try it out. That's, you borrow it and you go try it out. Now, when we say demonstration, we are not talking about someone taking a piece of device and showing how it works, 5 minutes, and you are done. No, that's not what we mean by demonstration. In the eyes of the Assistive Technology Act, a demonstration is a process where the staff shows the person a couple of different options about a particular line of product. So if someone comes to the center and they say, well, I have this or that situation, or I have a child who's has a speech impairment, and I'm wondering what is there that I can use, or what is out there that can be used to help the child. The staff are going to work with that individual, show them a range of options, and actually compare and contrast the features of the different options so that the person has a better sense of what is out there, what works, what doesn't work, etc. But it's not simply just show them one device and have them go on their merry way. No, you have to, they do compare and contrast, talk about the shortcomings, the benefits, etc. So a demonstration event is more involving than simply show one device and be done. No. And that's what these centers do. Now, if you are curious about what kinds of devices we have, you can go and check it out for yourself. If you go to the Mass Match website, the center, there's a link to the Assistive Technology Regional Centers. And from there, you can actually have access to the inventory of devices online. And you can read about the different devices. And if you want to borrow a device, you can actually submit a request online too. But at the very minimum, you can read about what is available and hopefully take whatever steps you want to take after that. So that's the device demonstration. And then of course, the loan part is where I talked about earlier. So you borrow a device to help you either have one to use while another is being repaired or replaced, or you want to borrow a device to help you make an informed decision about that particular device or the line of devices that hopefully can help you in whatever situation you find yourself. So oftentimes, school professionals, therapists, speech therapists, physical therapists, will borrow devices to try out with students that they are working with in the school system, okay, to help them. Why would they do that? Well, they will because even though a school may have an obligation to provide the technology, it helps if the professional that's working with the individual can try out a bunch of different options to help them settle on the one that's going to work best before they make the commitment to purchase it. So that's one way that school professionals take advantage of a program. Again, all of these are free services. Now, up to 4 devices can be borrowed at a time, and anybody at all can borrow a device. What we require for borrowing a device is very simple. Your name, address, you sign a piece of paper that says, yes, I'm taking on this obligation, so that if the device is not returned, we know who to reach out to. But otherwise, there isn't much to it. So if you've never tried out the program, now you know it exists and it's a resource for everyone. Not only people with disabilities, but the general public. So it can be a person who has a family member, a friend with a disability, and you're trying to help them. You can talk to them about it. You can talk to the center about it. You go visit and do what you need to do. Now, earlier on, I also talked about trainings that we offer to the public. Now, as I speak, we have a series of AT trainings going on. These are being conducted by our partners, Easter Seals and UCP. And I want to talk a little bit about those trainings. Now, it happens that one of them is actually taking place this afternoon after this summit is over. So those of you who have interest, you could go sign up after the when you have a break, and hopefully take part in the next one, which happens this afternoon at 1 p.m. If you go to the MassMarch website, there's a link there. There's an event calendar. That's the best way to get to these trainings to sign up. There's an event calendar on the website, and from there you'll be able to register for the series. So this particular training series is designed for folks in the ADRC network. So what is the ADRC network? ADRC stands for Aging and Disability Resource Consortia. So ADRC, Aging and Disability Resource Consortia. Now, these are organizations all over the state that bring together the elder service organizations, so the councils on aging, the disability groups, especially the independent living centers, and other organizations that work in that space. Organizations that serve people with disabilities and elders or seniors. And the purpose of the ADRC network is to help these groups talk to each other, work together to provide the services they do, so that hopefully when a person with a disability or an elder needs service, they don't have to go from one place to the other. They come through one door. So whether you reach out through your aging services network or the disability services network, as in the Independent Living Center, once you get in touch, hopefully that's the only door you have to go through. And then through their partnership, the ADRC partnership, they're able to provide a service that that person needs without being bounced around from one place to the other. So that's the ADRC network. Now, this particular set of trainings is being provided to help folks who work in the network and their partners prepare for, and help sort of deal with the effects of COVID-19 on people with disabilities and elders. So how are they doing that? They are doing that by acquiring these skills through the trainings, and hopefully, as a result, be able to help the individuals that come through their door. Now, the topics are about technology and resources that can be used to help people with interaction, socialization, hopefully to minimize the effects of COVID-19 on all of the people that they serve. And also, as a result, maybe increase social engagement. Now, as I said earlier on, they are happening now. They started from December. They're going to end in April. There's one today. There's another one on March 18th. And then there's another one on April 22nd, because they've been going on for a while now. Now, the trainings were funded by the Federal CARES Act, which all of us have heard about. And the funding came through the Executive Office of Elder Affairs. And then through the Executive Office, Mass Rehab Commission was giving some of the funds so that Mass Match and its partners, Easter Seals and UCP, can provide the trainings. Now, this slide here lists the different training sessions and the topics, which I said earlier, you can get all of that from the Mass Match website and also be able to register for the sessions if you are interested. Now, if you want to reach out to the ATRCs, the contact information is on the slide here. I can read them off, but I think each person has a link with a PowerPoint, so you can access it that way. If you want to call them, you can do that. If you want to go online and check out what they have, reach them by email, you can do that as well. I want to take a minute and talk about a couple of things, which is we have an event calendar that folks can visit and check out what we are offering. We also have an advisory council that I would like to invite everyone to please think about serving on the Mass Match Advisory Council if you are able. And then we also have what we call the Mass Match newsletters. And these are online opportunities for you to receive information about what we are doing, trainings and other things. So please check it out. The links are on this page. And I think that is about it. My contact information is on this page here. And I think that does it for me. Thank you very much for listening to me. Hopefully I've been able to provide enough information about what resources are there for us, people with disabilities, to be able to work and also live our personal lives And if you have any questions, my contact information is in the PowerPoint. Thank you very much, Moss. I think I'm going to hand it over to you and let me know when you're ready.
Thank you, Kobana. You can close out your camera and your slideshow, please.
Sure.
And I'd like to give our interpreters a moment to switch, please. Great, and as Kobana said, they have an excellent event today at 1 p.m. following our summit, so please join them and you can register on their website. If you go to www.massmatch.org, you can sign up for their 1 p.m. event. So thank you so much for that information. Just a reminder, we have been getting quite a few questions, so we ask that you please include your name, phone number, and email address when asking your question, and please make sure that you state who the question is for, and we'll be happy to follow up with you after that. So our next presenter today is Joe Davis. Joe, I'll ask you to please turn on your camera. Joe Davis is the Area Director for the Roxbury Area Office for the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission, MRC. Today, Joe will be presenting on vocational rehabilitation services in a virtual environment. I'd like to turn it now over to you, Joe.
Thank you, Moss. Good morning, everyone. I would just like to start by thanking Mary Macaulay, my former colleague, for inviting me to represent the MRC this morning with you all. And also, I'd like to thank all of her staff members and the people who came together to make this summit a successful one. My topic this morning is around vocational rehabilitation services during a global pandemic. However, whenever I'm representing my agency, I always like to start by sharing information about the agency in general. The MRC is comprised of 3 distinct divisions, and VR is just one of them. We also have the Community Living Division, which comprises SHIP, the home care program, and a number of other programs designed to help individuals who have disabilities to be in the community, to live and function independently and provide whatever resources they need in order for them to have a great quality of life. The other part of the MRC that's much lesser known is the Disability Determination Division. And this is a group of people in service to the MRC who works directly with the Social Security Administration in helping to determine people's eligibility for Social Security benefits. So it's partially funded by the federal government, just like the rest of MRC services, but it's one of the least known programs within the MRC. And so now I'd like to shift my focus to the VR division, which is where I work. And I think the most important part of my talk and your biggest takeaway will be that the MRC is fully functional remotely in the middle of a global pandemic. All MRC services are available via remote platforms. Now, it didn't start off being this seamless process. There were a lot of bumps in the road, and I'm going to discuss a few of them in the context of my talk. But in our pivoting, we've made a lot of important gains. We've recognized some areas of weaknesses, but we've also recognized a lot of areas of strengths. And these are things that I heard Secretary Heffernan talk about this morning, as well as in Mary's discussion in opening up the summit. There are silver linings to the pandemic. Even with all of the difficulties, it has presented us with some great opportunities to enhance our service capabilities. And those are the things that I really would like to focus on this morning. And so remember, all MRC services are fully available and accessible on remote platforms. So how did we arrive to where we are right now in March of 2021? Since March last year, I believe it was March 6th, we went totally remote. We shifted 98% of our operations and service delivery to remote platforms. 80% of our staff work fully remotely as I speak. So what were some of the discoveries that we made? One of them was it was more important than ever to make sure that we had great communication within our agency, not just within the agency, internally for program to program, and from the administrators, our senior leadership team, down to the rank and file. But it also meant that we had to grapple with our ability to successfully engage our community-based partners as well as our consumers. So some of the things that the MRC did, we developed a COVID steering committee. That group of people, they met around the clock, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes into the wee hours of the night, to strategize on how do we do this and how do we do it well, and what types of additional supports do our consumers need, and what do we need internally so that we're better able to meet the needs of our consumers. So the steering committee, they met, they provided a lot of direction. Another aspect of that was there were weekly Ask the Executive Team meetings. So this was to shore up the internal communication process. So all of the senior leadership team would meet with, we would have virtually, they're like baby town halls on a weekly basis, so that the commissioner would and her team could talk to us about the information flow coming from Governor Baker, Secretary Sutters, so that we had on the moment information regarding how we as a Commonwealth, employees of the Commonwealth, how would we render the most efficacious services, helping us to understand all of the different directives regarding PPEs and shutting down the area offices, and how do we connect with our consumers in a meaningful way. Another part of that communication strategy, the commission every week, sorry about that, I accidentally muted myself. Every week, the commissioner sent out a newsletter with updates on information that was coming from the State House, information coming from the CDC, so that we would all be in one accord with regards to our agency-wide response to the pandemic. So we had timely updates coming directly from the governor's office, and it enabled us to be able to move in real time to better meet the needs of our consumers. I spoke a moment ago about the importance of technology. Technology was important internally as well as externally. And so one of the things that we did was we rolled out laptops. Everybody had to have access to the correct technology that would allow us to have spur of the moment connection in Teams through Zoom platform and WebEx. We started to do more and more of our work rather than driving all around the Commonwealth. At the click of a mouse, we would be able to get together to have virtual team meetings. That helped us tremendously. We also held focus groups with the managers and the supervisors in order to better understand the work experience and how remote work challenged us and what we needed to do in order to enhance the experience of remote work for everyone. So it was supervisors, managers, but also the clerks got involved. It actually involved all sectors of the MRC because we realized we could not operate in silos. We had to have everybody on one accord. And as a result of those focus groups, we came to the realization that the MRC was in need of a profound modernization of IT effort. And so it included us having to access additional IT services and supports. And we also needed to be trained on using all of these different pieces of equipment. The other part of that was we realized quickly, and working in the Roxbury office, it was not something that was new to me. I'd always recognized that there was a deep digital divide for the people that we serve. But it wasn't just in Roxbury, it was out in Western Mass. A lot of people in remote and rural areas, they had very similar types of problems with accessing the technology, with accessing cable so that you would have the remote capacity to be able to use the computer, having equipment in coming from the technology connections. Thank you. So those were all things that we had to address. So regarding our strategy, I want to talk about some of the things that we did in order to enhance our services, but also about how we were able to break the digital divide. So one of the things that we did was we launched a consumer and family warm line. This is a platform that if you went onto the MRC website, you would see that if you were a consumer or if you were looking for information regarding one of the area offices, you could go in and type whatever your issue or your concern were, and there was and still is a dedicated person on a daily basis who goes in, retrieves that information, and funnels it out to all of the area offices so that there is a seamless communication loop so that consumers can reach the area offices and have their needs met. It's available on our public website and on all of the MRC social media accounts. We also provided a multi-language consumer survey on remote delivery. And so the survey identified that most of our consumers were satisfied with remote service delivery.
Jill, your microphone is muted.
Wow,
Thank you.
I don't know. I apologize, guys. I don't know how I keep doing that, but thank you, Moss, for helping to keep me on track. So the survey, the consumer survey is what I was discussing. And some of our consumers, their response was they felt satisfied with remote services, but they also identified that they lacked sufficient IT support, and they needed to have the connectivity with the World Wide Web in order for them to be able to use the remote capacity. So again, it pointed out to us that we needed to provide the technology, assist consumers with having remote capacity, and also we needed to figure out a way to train consumers on the use of the technology. So how do we break the digital divide? One of the things that we did as a result of that survey was we were able to get additional funding, and thanks to the governor, Secretary Sutters, and the legislature, we were able to get additional funding in order for us to be able to provide $5.4 million of combined state and federal funding in IT equipment to MRC consumers. This was unprecedented. Before COVID, it was a very long and laborious process for MRC consumers to obtain IT equipment. But I'm really happy and proud to say that at this point, it's a much easier process. And today, the VR program has secured equipment for more than 3,800 MRC consumers. This is just from March of 2020 up to where we are right now and counting. So whereas in the past, it would sometimes take months in order to access IT equipment, now we have a rolling tally of submissions on a monthly basis so that we can request equipment for our consumers. That's major. So I want to just give you a little bit of background on the types of equipment that we've provided. We have delivered 3,207 laptops, which include basic Microsoft Office software. We have rendered 595 iPads, 2,000 printers, and each printer has an extra ink cartridge, 500 monitors, including 200 large screen monitors for people who have visual impairments to enhance their experience of being able to access remote services. We have given out 1,300 keyboards and mice. We know that they're individually, they're mouse, but this is like more than one, so we're going to call them mouse. We also have given out 1,100 headsets. In addition to the IT equipment, the MRC has provided funding for a software essentials training class, which is an IT-related training program that allows our consumers to have one-on-one in-class remote training opportunities that prepares them for work. And we've also provided skills training in other venues on how to navigate and how to use the technology. It's been, I want to say it's been a smashing success thus far. And so early on, I talked about how the pandemic has also had a silver lining. And so I think it's really important as we're looking at the difficulties. Yes, it has been an exceedingly difficult year. There's been loss of life, people who've been sick. I know in my office, we've had 4 people who've had COVID, many people who've had close family members who've been victims of the pandemic. And there's been a loss of life to our loved ones, consumers alike. So, but back to the silver lining, some of the things that have happened has really put the MRC in a position where we are able to provide a much stronger connection link to our consumers. And so one of them came about in September. The MRC launched the MRC Connect, and that is a unit that provides an integrated experience that connects consumers with the full array of MRC services, regardless of program. Now, for those of you who have some familiarity with the MRC, you know that there is a vast array of different types of programs that we offer. And sometimes it has been confusing trying to figure out how do you access all of those different services. Well, now you can go into onto our website and you'll be able to, like, if you're looking for severe head injury support services, you'll be able to zero directly into that, and it will have all of the connective information that you would need in order to access that. So in addition to providing an improved consumer experience, the MRC Connect increases the agency's operational efficiency by avoiding redundancies and duplications of services. So in the past, that's been one of the, I would say, difficulties or obstacles with accessing MRC services and for us in rendering services. So now all of that's going to be streamlined. And for the first time in agency history, consumers can now apply for services online. This is groundbreaking for the MRC. We have come fully into the 21st century. You can access VR services. You can apply for VR services rather than the old way where you'd have to figure out which area office is assigned to you based on where you live. In one fell swoop, you can go online and you can apply, and MRC staff will figure all of that out for you, and someone will contact you within 24 hours regarding service delivery. When I say groundbreaking, this is really, in my estimation, someone who's been in the agency for 34, this year, 2021 will be 35 years. This is almost like the promised land. You can operate statewide head injury, home care assistance, supported living, 688 program. All of MRC services would be accessible through the MRC Connect. Since launching in September, the MRC Connect has received 774 online applications and processed 769 referrals from the app. The agency is averaging 16 applications daily, and that's not counting people coming through the area offices. This is strictly coming from MRC Connect. So, I hope you would agree with me. This is really, this is really groundbreaking for us. So, I also want to share with you guys, and this is again something that Mary mentioned regarding the tumultuousness over the last year with regard to the protests, the racial reckoning, and the murders, and the focus on social justice, racial reconciliation, and looking for equity and access. So I really wanted to share with you all that the MRC is no different than any other agency in state government. And while we here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we're grappling with the issues as it relates to us as workers, us as constituents within the Commonwealth, and us as consumers of different services within the Commonwealth. So we've had our own internal process, and I am really proud to say to you that the MRC has been engaged in an ongoing internal process to look at how we operate as an agency, how things work internally amongst our staff members, but beyond that, how does those larger issues, how do they play out in the day-to-day life and living of the people that we are charged to serve within the Commonwealth? And so we're engaged in behind the scenes work to facilitate our capacity to better serve all of our consumers, but we're also looking at it through a racial equity lens as it relates to staffing patterns, as it relates to how we provide services to people from multicultural communities. And it is a gargantuan task, but we are up to the task. And I'm really grateful that we have an administration that is cognizant of these issues and is working with us and has taken the lead in terms of providing us with the types of supports that we need in order to help the MRC to be the best MRC that we can possibly be. And so some of the things that we've done to demonstrate our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Personally, I'm a bit biased. I feel like the MRC is one of the leaders within the Commonwealth, if not the number one agency with regards to its commitment to racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I consider myself to be one of the drum majors for this effort. We have hosted listening and healing circles for Black staff and other staff of color. The agency spent money to assist us with pulling that off. And the sessions were very revealing. They were very poignant, hard to listen to at times, and, you know, kind of pained you in the heart. But it was a very necessary process to assist us in being able to come to terms with the trauma that we experience from day to day as people of color. And so for me, I counted it as a win for the agency because it puts us in a place where we're stronger and we're better able to bring our whole selves to bear in our work life. Another thing that we've done is we've contracted with Bijou Consulting Group, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with Chris because he conducted many sessions on behalf of the Commonwealth around healing during all of the protests. So the MRC has contracted with him to provide some research and analyze our racial equity work and to give us some guidance on how we can do a better job. And it is a work in process, but again, I'm deeply gratified that the agency has undertaken to do this work because we have to, in order to heal, you've got to look at the underlying causes. And so we're about the business of doing that at the MRC. We just completed a very successful Black History Month celebration, and we had events throughout the month. We had a social media awareness campaign. And as I stated before, we're looking at hiring decisions, employment retention, consumer service delivery. All of those are parts of our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So now I think it's about time for me to wrap things up. And the main takeaway I want to stress to you guys at this time is the MRC is fully functional and it is available to provide a more comprehensive customer service friendly access to VR services in particular. We have the MRC Connect, we have the Warm Line, we have the availability of a vast array of IT supports for consumers. We also have the availability of remote employment opportunities, remote trainings, job-driven opportunities. We actually have a more comprehensive array of services designed to promote employment. That's the key for VR. Everything that we do is around assisting individuals who have disabilities to get employment, sustain employment, and to be able to live a higher quality of life so that they can capture their piece of the American dream. Work is intrinsic to who you are, how you show up in the world. If you don't have a job, it doesn't mean you're less of a person, but work is, you know, when you meet someone, what is the first thing people usually say? They don't ask about who you are as a person. They usually say, what do you do? People with disabilities, they want their fair share of the American dream. And it is my job and my privilege to work in an agency whose main mission is around providing and promoting work and equal access. So The last thing I would like to leave you with is back in the day when you watched TV, they would say, and now a word from our sponsor. Well, what I want to leave you with is this. This is a pitch on the virtues of public service. I mentioned before, I have worked within the MRC for 34, this year will be 35 years. It is the best job I have ever had. It has not been free of problems, and I don't want to intimate that, but it has provided me with a platform that I know I have been able to assist people to live their best lives. So being a dedicated public servant, it's how I see my purpose in life. Right now, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is top heavy with people in my age group, people who will be segueing into retirement in the foreseeable future. For those of you who are looking for jobs, consider the MRC. Or beyond that, I would love for you to come to work for the MRC, but there's a whole Commonwealth of Massachusetts that is looking for great workers. If you're looking for a job, go to Mass Careers, peruse it. There may be something there for you. If you're a Republican, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts wants you. If you're a Democrat, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts needs you. If you're a progressive, if you're an independent, it doesn't matter what your political affiliations are. What matters is if you have a need and you want to make a difference in the world, consider becoming a public servant. I guarantee you, you will be able to walk a little bit taller, feel a little bit better about who you are and how you show up in the world, because every day you know that you have a direct impact on the quality of anybody's life. In my case, it's people who have disabilities, but you could be working in Department of Public Health, you could work in administration and finance. There, any job that you would like to do, I guarantee you can find a counterpart within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So that's my public service announcement. And so I thank you for listening to me today. I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit. There are some exciting speakers lined up for you. And I'm happy to entertain any questions. Just put them into the chat and Moss will make sure that we get them. So enjoy the rest of your summit. And thank you for listening to me. Thank you, Moss.
Thank you so much, Jill. We're going to be taking a 5-minute break right now. We will return at 10:38 a.m. And presenting next, we have updates from the Massachusetts Office on Disability, the New England ADA Center, the Perkins Library, and Independence Associates. So please take 5 minutes, refill your coffee, and please come back at 10:38 a.m. Thank you so much again, Joe, and thank you to MRC for your time. All right, everybody, we'll be starting in about 30 seconds. All right, everyone, the time is now 10:39 a.m. and we are going to begin our program again. I have posted all of the links in the chat for you for the captions, the PowerPoint presentation, the support documents, and our program. In the summit program is the agenda, the names and bios of all of our presenters, and organizational and contact information for all of the presenters and their organizations as well. Again, those links are in the chat, and we will email everything to everyone to the email that you registered with after the summit, along with the recording of this event in a few days. So welcome back. Again, my name is Moss Lynch, and I am the Assistant Director for Training and Communications at the Massachusetts Office on Disability. Thank you all again for attending today's summit. We've been doing this now for 6 years, first time going virtual, and it has been a challenge, but it has been fun. The Massachusetts Office on Disability serves as a resource to state agencies, municipalities, and members of the general public by providing information, guidance, and training on matters concerning disability-related civil rights, equal access, and opportunity. Over the course of the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'm going to give you some agency updates, an overview of our work from 2020, and some goals and initiatives that we have for 2021. Over the course of 2020, MOD has participated in emergency planning seminars, conducted various statewide trainings, and produced numerous documents retaining information about accessible virtual meetings, outdoor dining, and general ADA information. During 2020, MOD co-hosted public Zoom meetings about health and safety initiatives regarding COVID-19 with the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, or MEMA. Prior to and during this pandemic, MOD provided technical assistance to MEMA about their Title II programmatic responsibilities, including evaluating shelters for communication and architectural access. We have helped MEMA develop guidelines as shelter needs continued to change during the COVID environment. Throughout 2020, we inspected the suitability of shelters for people requiring isolation, those who were displaced from their homes, first responder housing, and shelters for non-COVID emergency situations. We maintained a continual presence in the MEMA bunker during the height of the pandemic, and we're continuing to work with MEMA as needed throughout this pandemic. We have also hosted statewide Commission on Disability, Municipal ADA Coordinator, and Executive Branch ADA Coordinator calls to discuss grant funding, emergency preparedness, and reasonable accommodations during COVID-19. We have also presented on equal access and accessibility during remote working. Our community service unit conducted 32 emergency preparedness trainings, and we distributed 1,194 go bags. And in those go bags included emergency equipment, supplies, and workbooks. We've also hosted multiple electric vehicle charging station accessibility trainings and attended numerous Commission on Disability meetings to provide technical assistance and guidance. It has been a challenge throughout COVID-19 and accessibility for people with disabilities. Thus, we've created numerous guidance publications to try and help those to understand equal access and rights for all. The MOD Bulletin was just published with all of our information, and it is posted on our website. We'll make sure to have a link to that as well in the chat at the end of this presentation. Last spring, we knew restaurants were planning to open back up, so we created a guidance on obligations for accessibility in outdoor dining. This guidance, titled Outdoor Dining and Seating Accessibility Fact Sheet, provides dining establishments with an understanding of the rules and regulations regarding accessibility so that all patrons may have a safe, equitable, and accessible experience while dining and enjoying the soon to be here warm and sunny weather with hopefully no more snow. More information about outdoor dining will be held in our upcoming Level Up to Equality webinar, which I will explain in a bit. Now, MOD also became aware through its regular interactions with the public that various programs were taking place with the remote working and throughout COVID-19 without the consideration of people with disabilities. As an agency, we collaborated to develop and create a letter to send to all municipalities, asking them to ensure they are considering the needs of people with disabilities when they are developing their programs. We need to ensure that even in a crisis, people with disabilities will continue to have equal access without discrimination or increased safety risks due to COVID-19. When COVID-19 hit, the majority of people started to work remotely. This change of course posed many accessibility challenges through software, virtual meetings, a general lack of knowledge for accommodations, and a lack of knowledge and understanding of how to use some of the equipment. Our office published a fact sheet titled Accessible and Inclusive Virtual Trainings. This fact sheet offers guidance focused on providing accessible virtual meetings, reasonable accommodations, and information on how to ensure communication standards under the ADA are being upheld. All of these publications that we've created can be found on our newly renovated Mass Office on Disability website. Our website developments make it easier and more user-friendly to navigate through our various pages of information. On our homepage, we've added categories that focus on MOD services, disability rights, access and resources, vocational rehabilitation and independent living, information on all of our training, events, and publication, and information on architectural access and our municipal grant funding. We've also created a webpage to help you understand some basic concepts that clarify how to navigate state and federal government organizations that serve the disability community. This website is called Finding Your Way Around Organizations Serving the Disability Community, and the link for that webpage is posted here in the chat. One of the main duties of the Mass Office on Disability is to assist state agencies, disability organizations, and the general public with technical assistance and inquiries regarding various laws and regulations that address the rights of people with disabilities. Throughout 2020, MOD answered thousands of calls and emails from the general public, state agencies, companies, nonprofit organizations, and disability organizations. Our office also receives grant money to assist communities around Massachusetts to create accessible infrastructure. Through our municipal ADA improvement grant program, our office was able to give 50 grants to 48 different communities, totaling $1,937,000. Over the past year, MOD has spent time intentionally reflecting on our agency's commitment to growth in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Specifically, we've been focused on learning about the experiences of Black, Indigenous, and people of color and the intersectionality between race and disability. We realize we do have a lot to learn, and we've created a DEI committee to drive our learning. And we plan how MOD can be more inclusive internally and externally to better serve a diverse and underserved community in all of the work that we do. The newly established committee is an important piece of our agency's core mission to ensure that people with disabilities can equally participate in all aspects of life in Massachusetts. While we've certainly been busy in 2020, we still have a lot more work to do. MOD is currently working on some detail-oriented goals for 2021. We've been developing webinars and workshops for you, and each quarter, we will start hosting the Level Up to Equality quarterly webinar. We will be covering topics of interest for people with disabilities, and the topic of our April 14th webinar will cover outdoor dining and accessibility, which will then also focus on what is needed to ensure accessibility for parking, dining, and facility access throughout the dining areas. A link to register for that event will be posted in the chat as well. And again, that is on April 14th on Zoom. Our Client Assistance Program, or CAP, will also be hosting some great CAP workshops. As part of the ADA Title I employment duties under a grant, the Client Assistance Program has developed an interactive disability disclosure and employment series, which will include 3 separate 1-hour workshops on Zoom. Our first workshop, The Decision to Disclose, focuses on how a person with a disability decides whether to disclose their disability at different stages of the employment process. Attendees discuss the advantages and disadvantages of disclosure and how much to share. Sign up for an upcoming disclosure session on our website, and the link will be in the chat. Our Reasonable Accommodations workshop will launch in late spring, and Disability Discrimination and Employment workshop will launch in the fall. We'll also be posting regular updates about these workshops on our Twitter, and you can follow us at Mass Disability. A second MOD bulletin will be released later in 2021, highlighting the successes and updates from these events that I've just explained. We will continue to update the Mass Office on Disability website. We will further develop content from our office and create additional publications, including important updates to our MOD services, brochures, and fact sheets to assist everyone in a variety of areas. Again, the links to all of these publications, registration links, and information have been posted into our chat. And with that, I would like to thank you for your time, and I would like to give our interpreters a moment to switch while we move on to our next presenter. Thank you. Our next presenters are Stacy Hart and Jason Angel from the New England ADA Center. Stacy and Jason, please prepare your cameras and presentation. Stacy is the Information and Outreach Specialist. Jason is the Information Specialist, Trainer, and Researcher at the New England ADA Center. Today, they will both be presenting a brief overview on the Americans with Disability Act, the ADA, and COVID-19. I'd like to turn it now over to you, Jason and Stacy.
Hi, boss. Thank you very much for having us today. As we've already heard, we are all very deep within COVID and what that means. The New England ADA Center also has been looking at how COVID and this pandemic affects the lives of people with disabilities, specifically the intersection of COVID and the Americans with Disabilities Act. But first, before we get started, a little bit about the organization that we work for. Jason and I work for the New England ADA Center, one of 10 regional centers across the country that provide information and training on the Americans with Disabilities Act to promote and facilitate compliance with the ADA. We're not an enforcement agency. All calls are confidential, so you can reach Jason and I via the 800 number. We are fortunate to be housed within the Institute for Human-Centered Design, an international nonprofit focused on enhancing the experiences of all people of all ages and abilities, people of all socioeconomic groups. So very briefly, these are some of the topics that we will be covering today, because a person's civil rights do not disappear just because a pandemic has occurred. There is a way for people with disabilities to participate in all programs, services, and activities and continue to work in the community while protecting the health and safety of everybody involved. So we will be covering today the ADA, COVID and employment, including questions that can be asked, confidentiality, and reasonable accommodations. We'll be talking about the ADA, COVID, and face coverings. And finally, we will be talking about the ADA, COVID, and vaccines. So let's get started. The CDC and other public health organizations recommendations can and often do work in harmony with the Americans with Disabilities Act. First, we have received a lot of calls from employees with disabilities around fears about returning to the office. There's a lot of fear and there's also a lot of misinformation. So some questions that we've gotten. At this time, at the time of this presentation, COVID is considered a public safety risk that rises to the level of direct threat. Because COVID is a health and safety risk, or in ADA language, a direct threat, employers may ask employees medical questions that they would not ordinarily be able to, such as, do you have COVID or symptoms of COVID, such as cough, sore throat, fever, chills, and shortness of breath? Employers can ask employees if they've been tested for COVID and for the results of those tests. They can also test employees for COVID. Employers can take the temperatures of employees that are returning to the office or will have an ongoing presence in the office. Temperatures of 100.4 are considered a fever. Employees who refuse to answer questions about COVID or COVID symptoms or take a COVID test or have their temperature taken can be excluded from the office. However, before an employer takes that step, we recommend that they have a conversation with this employee to see why they feel uncomfortable with these questions, with these tests. Ordinarily, it's true, employers couldn't require these type of medical exams or this type of medical information, but because we're in the midst of a pandemic, an employer can ask. So it may be the employee has a lack of information about this fact, or they may fear that other people will have access to their medical information. Remember, even during a pandemic, an employer must keep medical information confidential. An employer must keep medical information confidential, including temperature checks and COVID testing. However, an employer can ask an employee who tests positive for a list of coworkers whom they may have come in contact with, but they may not disclose to those fellow coworkers, to those fellow employees, the name of the employee. An employer may not ask about an employee's family members because that would be a violation of the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. The GINA prevents asking for this information. A better inquiry would be whether the employee has had any contact with anyone who has COVID or who has experienced symptoms of COVID. So a much broader, more generic question would be okay. Employers may require that an employee coming into the office wear masks, gloves, and they may take other infection control precautions. So they may require social distancing as well as hand washing. An employer must consider reasonable accommodations for employees who cannot wear a face mask because of a disability. And let's go through some reasonable accommodations now. An employee must be able to perform the essential job functions. Some tasks must be performed on site, but as we're finding out, more and more tasks can be performed remotely. A lot of office work, telephone calls, Zoom meetings can be performed through Zoom and other platforms. So what was once thought to be required in office can now be done remotely. There are also, however, accommodations that can be provided in office. An employer can set up one-way aisles. They can install plexiglass and other barriers to reduce contact and exposure. And they can provide other accommodations to an employee who needs to come into the office. It's important to remember also that it may take longer for an employer to process a reasonable accommodation request. More employees with disabilities are asking for accommodation. They may not have needed an accommodation before the pandemic. Now they're at a high risk for the effects of COVID, so they may put in a reasonable accommodation request. On the other side, an employee may have trouble um, obtaining the documentation they need to show that they have a disability and need of an accommodation. So the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, suggests that employers provide an accommodation on a temporary basis while awaiting and going through the process and awaiting the documentation from the employee. Jason?
Thank you, Stacy. Just 1 second while I put my slides up, please. So we're going to take a look at some developing issues. And what we're considering now is how the executive orders requiring face coverings may have caused some confusion. Orders requiring face masks are allowed because we're in a pandemic and there's a safety risk for the public. Most executive orders have provided reasonable modifications for people with medical conditions that prevent them from wearing a face covering. The CDC recommends face masks even if people can maintain 6 feet of distance. And the current guidance recently has been that people are suggested to wear 2 face coverings at the same time. And as the new variants come in, I think this guidance will be even more important. During the pandemic, everyone can be seen, as Stacy said, as a direct threat, especially for people that cannot wear a face covering. So if someone cannot wear a mask, then we have to take a look at some forms of accommodations and how they may be necessary in places like stores, municipal buildings, public spaces. Businesses and municipalities can follow the guidance of the CDC or other public health agency during the COVID pandemic, but they're responsible for keeping abreast of changing recommendations. Masks may not be necessary when you're outside by yourself, away from others, or with people who you live in your household. However, some areas may have mask mandates while out in public, so please check the rules in your local area, such as your city, your county, or state. Additionally, check whether any federal mask mandates apply to where you'll be going. And so there are also concerns for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. And entities need to make considerations for people who are deaf of hard of hearing, especially when wearing a face mask, because that can make communication difficult. Clear face masks may have been maybe one consideration for people who lip read. Face masks with a plastic insert make the lips visible. The ADA requires that a state and local government, business or nonprofit organization take appropriate steps to ensure that communication with members of the public with disabilities are as effective as communications with others. Now, since we cannot assume that all people will have face masks with the plastic inserts, we recommend that people who need this accommodation reach out to a public entity and request that staff have and use face masks with plastic inserts as an accommodation. Now, as Stacy said earlier, we've been receiving no end of calls around the COVID-19 restrictions where it applies to employment, but also even on this face mask topic. And we hear a story where somebody will say, I have a disability that prevents me from wearing a mask, and the store won't let me in or do my shopping. Now, the CDC recommends the 2 different face coverings now, as I mentioned, and the 6 feet of distance. If a person cannot wear a mask, then they may be a direct threat, and then the person may not be allowed into the building. So that's just kind of one of the simple realities right now. If that's the case, then we're asking that some considerations be made for reasonable modifications. And in that, we ask that people take into consideration things like curbside service, phone ordering, or delivery. And if not, then have a communication with that person with a disability to determine what accommodations can be made. Again, it's just, we encourage businesses or entities to stay apprised of any of the changing CDC and public health authority guidance. So as people are starting to return to work, or we're reopening in different forms, we're taking a look at having how there's such a diversity of issues and a diversity of people. In the past, we've recognized that an employer in certain situations could require a flu vaccination, but then they have to take into consider a reasonable accommodation through their interactive process that may exempt some people with disabilities from having that flu vaccine. We would encourage entities to look at this through the lens of the interactive process, where somebody discloses they have a disability and would like a reasonable accommodation. As mentioned earlier, documentation may be required and an assessment made after that. You also have to consider that there may be exemptions as the reply to religious beliefs under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And we would consider this same guidance for the coronavirus vaccine. But we also need to recognize that this guidance may change, especially since the COVID-19 virus is far more dangerous than the flu. We also want to make sure at this time that an entity notes that their drive-through testing sites, when we're looking at vaccination sites, testing sites, that they need to be accessible. But so too do their websites. As previous presented earlier on the importance of accessible platforms, we're also taking into consideration how people would book or sign up for testing or vaccination. There shouldn't be barriers to people booking a vaccine or test due to a poorly designed website. So as some presenters have mentioned earlier, it's been some pretty gray skies, but there are little peaks of positivity, and as others have mentioned, little silver linings. So what we're noting here is how the world has kind of opened to people with disabilities who need to stay at home because of their disability. And what we recognize is that this has become a little easier than what we had thought. So last March, when everything started closing down, it really did jump into the virtual world with some aches and pains, and that's obvious. But things had made, in a large way, that transition, where people are able to work remotely, which had long been held as an uncertainty especially when you consider things like performance and production. Things like taking classes are now, in many instances, in most instances, virtual. Many courses and programs that had long been traditionally held in person now have been made accessible and available online. And that opens a huge learning opportunity for some people that aren't able to kind of leave their homes or are required to stay closer to home. Museums have had to transition to try to stay viable during these times, and they've created or enhanced virtual tours. And so this museum experience, not just for people with disabilities, but for people in all walks of ability that are able to participate in a certain way. And so too, the same thing for events, like especially music. I think many of us have seen how musicians have really taken to streaming events. One a good example from last St. Patrick's Day and the St. Patrick's Day, the tradition of the Dropkick Murphys playing in an event. And what they've done is started streaming their events live. And not only does this allow any audience member, but audience members with disabilities. So it's one of the events that I'm looking forward to again this year. It's important also to consider that online platforms, how we present, as Moss had mentioned earlier, and they did share their guidelines, which is great, is how, whatever platform you use, like Zoom, or Teams, or Blackboard, or some other web hosting service, that it's really important to emphasize effective communication and the equal participation. That will be important. So we've given you quite a bit to chew on, and because of the nature of the employment and the complexity that we've kind of described, we really encourage you to visit our website for more COVID-19 information in the ADA at newenglandada.org. Furthermore, Stacy and I are available to take some questions. We've been receiving plenty of phone calls on this, and you can reach out to us at our email addresses listed here. Or if you'd like to talk to us in person, you can reach us at 800-949-4232. Thank you very much for your time. Moss, back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jason. I'd like to give the interpreters a moment to please switch. Great. So we did receive a message that our next interpreter, Kim Perkins from the Perkins Library, needs to move her presentation to a little bit later in the agenda. So I'm asking if Steve Higgins, if you're on, can you please turn on your camera?
Hi, Moss. This is Steve.
Hi, Steve.
I am here, but I'm not sure if Ryan is here yet because he was teaching at another thing. But I can jump in and talk quickly. Let me send Ryan a message real quick too, to see if he can jump right on too.
Thank you.
All right. I just sent Ryan a quick message, so hopefully he'll be jumping on. I'm really excited to be here today, folks. Just really want to thank Mary, Moss, and the whole crew at MOD for inviting us to be here today. I'm going to just talk really briefly about something that's really exciting, and that is about the work that the 10 independent living centers here in Massachusetts have been doing. And it's pretty exciting. We have a network of 10 centers here in Massachusetts, and those 10 centers cover every single community within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And so if you're a person who needs access to services, doesn't know exactly what direction to go, you can reach out to the centers. There's also a listing on the Mass Statewide Independent Living Council's website of the independent living centers and the cities and towns that they cover. This past year was really a challenge for a lot of folks. And, as you've been hearing from other presenters, but at the same time, it was a year of growth. And it's kind of interesting when we look at it that way. I don't really have a real pretty PowerPoint presentation because some of the data that I'm presenting is data that we just finalized just in the past couple days to be able to do an annual report to the federal government on the work that centers are doing. But last year, the 10 independent living centers in Massachusetts provided services to 32,353 people with disabilities. That's pretty significant. But what's more significant about that number is of those people, 5,974 of them had never received services from a center before. So here we are in a year with a pandemic, we had a growth of 18% in the number of people that were provided services by independent living centers. And that's pretty significant because in the year of 2020, we provided, in 2019, we provided services to about almost 6,000 less people. It's really interesting when you think about the work that the centers do. It's broken down into a couple of categories, but more significantly, 13,391 people benefited from the information and referral services provided by the 10 centers. And that's really, really exciting when we look at that people are reaching out to the centers and the centers are able to provide that information. 1,071 youth benefited from the services provided within the Centers for Independent Living in the PREETS program, which is a very exciting program, and within the TAP program, which is the Transition to Adulthood program. And each of the 10 centers has a Transition to Adulthood program, and some of the centers have the PREETS program, some of which, like the one at Independence Associates, is just starting. Some of the other centers are a little bit more established, but we're working in partnership with MRC to grow those programs. One significant number to look at, or a couple significant numbers to look at, is last year, just under 10,000 people, 9,498 people received information on access to health care from the independent living centers. And that is really significant because when we look at the pandemic and we look at where we are right now, access to health care has been one of the biggest challenges that many of us face. Before we used to have barriers to, getting just to health care. Then there was barriers to actually receiving health care during the pandemic. And so the centers have assisted 9,400 people with that. And also during a year when we've been facing a pandemic, 518 people were assisted in finding housing. And this, when you look at it, is just amazing when you think of that. And of those, 198 of those people were people that were living in nursing homes or institutionalized settings across the Commonwealth. So when we look at this, one of the biggest places that we saw folks affected by the pandemic were persons that were living in nursing homes and institutionalized settings. During a pandemic, with just about every barrier that you could face, the 10 independent living centers in Massachusetts helped 198 people move back into the community. And that is just really, really significant and exciting when we think about that. The independent living centers provide core services. Those are information and referral, skills training, peer counseling or peer support, depending on which center that you're talking about is what we title it. Advocacy, both individual and community. The centers work to make sure that not only Our individual consumers have access to the supports and services that they need, but we work to remove barriers within the community to make sure that we can all access the places that we would like to go. And so when we look at these types of things and look at the tools that are available at the centers, I just encourage everyone, to reach out to your local center. I know that the folks at MOD can put up the link to the Massachusetts Silk website, which has the addresses, phone numbers, and contact for all 10 centers. And if you reach out to one of the centers by mistake, say, you're excited about what Ryan's going to present in a minute, and you reach out to IA, and we're not the right center, we're going to make sure that we transfer you over to the Independent Living Center in your service area so that you receive those services and supports. And we all work together as a team with MRC, Easter Seals, and a lot of other organizations to make sure that people have the supports and services to live individually in the community as they choose. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan. I see that Ryan is here. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, and he's just going to share about some of the unique things that we were able to do in our youth and independent living program when we all had to shift from this idea of providing services in person to providing services online. So thanks again for the opportunity to present today. And I'm going to hand it over to Ryan and turn off my microphone and screen and be quiet. And that's going to shock people because I usually talk for longer than this. So here you go, Ryan.
All right. Can everybody hear me? Great. All right. So as you heard from Steve, my name is Ryan Mcleod. I represent Independence Associates. We are a not-for-profit independent living center located in East Bridgewater, Massachusetts. Sometimes people hear about an independent living center and they're not exactly sure what that is. It sounds a little bit like a residential facility or a day hab. It's actually neither of those things. We exist to help people with disabilities to remain in the community, to live where they want to live the lives they want to live, and to have the experiences they want without being institutionalized. So that's some of what we do. We are completely nonprofit. Everything that we offer is completely free of charge. And as Steve said, we've had to adapt some things for the pandemic. We were typically doing all of our supports and services in person, but now we've moved quite a bit of them over to Zoom, and I'm happy to share some of those with you today. So thank you very much for having me. So I'll start with the youth program. So we have a pre-ETS program, a pre-employment transition services program, and a TAP program, transition to adulthood program. And these are designed for students 14 to 22 years old. Typically, it's a lot of students that are receiving special education services from the state, but not always. It's people with any sort of disability. And there's a time when those supports in school will come to an end. You turn 22 and you're sort of thrown out on your own, and hopefully you've learned enough in that time to have an idea of how to navigate the system and all those things. Well, Independence Associates is here to help. We're here to work with you as early as possible from age 14 on to learn things like independent living skills and get things in mind like going to college or looking for a job, these things that will come up in your life. So the sooner we can work with you, the better, and we're able to start at 14 with these programs. The other thing about Independence Associates is once you turn 22, we are able to continue to work with you. So sometimes the supports from the state will change, or from your schools will change. Independence Associates is able to continue working with you for as long as you'd like. So I'm talking about youth programs, but Independence Associates and any independent living service organization can work with you at any age across any disability. And we're very flexible. We try to meet people where they are. We can work in groups. We can work one-on-one. We're always trying to reach people and to make those connections and to help people get on that path towards independence. And when we say independence, we mean living in the community that you want to live in, living the life you want to live in, not that you're by yourself. You know, we all need supports. We all need services. Independent living is there to help provide those supports and services so that people can live the life that they want. Pre-ETS is our pre-employment transition services program. We do things like work readiness, job exploration counseling, self-advocacy, peer mentoring, counseling on post-secondary education, and training programs. And we've moved this entirely online. This is available via Zoom for people 14 to 22 who are enrolled in school. We do hard skills like, expectations of an employer. We do soft skills like making friends in the workplace and appropriate interactions with customers and coworkers and all of these sorts of things. So it can be a really good program just to sort of introduce the idea of working to young adults, to get them thinking in that direction of, what am I going to do with my life? And to start building some of those skills. So even if they don't know what they want to do necessarily, a lot of the skills are easily transferable across workplaces or in life. A lot of the skills that we go over are good just for your life. So we'd like to encourage people to take part in that. And I know a lot of other independent living centers around the Commonwealth and other nonprofits also offer pre-ed services. So as Steve said, if you're not in our service area and we're not able to work directly with you, we will help connect you to somebody who can. So pre-eds 14 to 22 enrolled in high school, or can be post high school for some circumstances. Most of the lessons that we offer are just for 1 hour a week over Zoom. So it's a really small time commitment. You can show up, make some friends, work with Jacqueline, who does a lot of our pre-ed services. She's fantastic. And it's just a really good way to sort of get the ball rolling towards thinking about that next step in life once you leave high school. And it's a lot of fun. And there's always the caveat that if people were to come, young adults, they say, hey, I want to see what pre-eds is about. And then they come and they say, this isn't for me. That's okay. There's no obligation to stay. Everything we offer is completely free of charge. It's completely consumer directed. So whatever the consumer wants to do and work on is what we're here to help. And if they choose not to work with us, that's okay too. And the younger students begin, the better, because the sooner we can start talking about these skills while they still have those supports in high school and from the state and from their parents and whoever, the better. It's a great time to start to make friends and to have a support system in place for once that next step in your life becomes a reality. Next program is Transition to Adulthood. This is what we call TAP. It's independent living skills training for high school students aged 14 to 22. The example that I put here is one of our more popular program, which is studying for the driving permit. This is something that causes a lot of anxiety for a lot of young adults everywhere. And we've had some really good experiences working with people, helping people to get through the test and sort of see the questions for what they are, some test taking techniques. And we've had really good success with people taking and passing the test. So if there's somebody out there, young adult, or even an adult, we will do this with anybody of any age who's looking to increase their independence by learning to drive and getting their driving permit. Independence Associates is here to help, and we can do it one-on-one or in a group, whatever works best for the person. And then other independent living skills, anything that you can think of that would help somebody to remain independent in the community, Independence Associates is here to help. So it can really be anything that even just sort of broadly or tangentially relates to somebody living successfully in the community. Again, we are an independent living center. Our goal is to help people to live the life where they want to live it and live the life that they choose. And that means not ending up in an institution. So everything that we offer is geared at helping people to build those skills and to get those supports in place to remain in the community that they choose. We also, since we've gone online, have really upped our social and games groups. We used to do a monthly event in person on Fridays that was, or a couple of them actually, on Fridays that were pretty well attended and people really looked forward to them. And we wanted to make sure that these supports remained as best as much as we possibly could during the pandemic. So we've moved a bunch of our events online, and we've also invented and made new events for people to take part in. So every Monday, we play Jackbox games. That's if you're not aware, it's a computer game. You might have heard of the game like You Don't Know Jack. That's one of the games that's included in Jackbox, or Quiplash. There's a bunch of games and they're really popular. And one of the great things about this is anybody can join from anywhere. You don't even have to be a consumer of Independence Associates. So if you're out there and you're thinking of somebody who might be interested in coming on to Zoom and making some friends and playing some games with us, and you're outside of our service area, you're not in those 31 cities and towns that we cover, like Brockton, Plymouth, Taunton, that's okay. We will work with anybody who wants to come and work with us remotely. Or if we can't, if we're at capacity or for whatever reason we can't help you, we will get you in touch with somebody who can. You know, we are here to help. We want to help everybody, even outside of our service area. So please be in touch. Disability Culture Club. This has been one of our really successful groups here. Is we have a group that every Tuesday meets and they discuss things like disability poetry, living with a disability. We have parents, we have young adults, people who come in and share their experiences. We have some people who write their own poetry or will write their own short stories, and we go through them, or we'll look at, you know, paintings or whatever. And it's just a really great way to broach the topic of disability, because disability really isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to be celebrated. It's the diversity of life, you know. People with disabilities are human beings who have opinions and have life goals and deserve to be heard. And this is just a really great opportunity for people to do that. And if it sounds like it's a little too much, you know, like the culture things, it's honestly, it is for everybody. It is at everybody's level. It's not a college level course or anything. It's for people to come, share their opinions, and to make friends. That's a lot of what we do, is we bring people around the state or around our service area together into these groups where they can talk to each other and make connections. And for a lot of people, that's been lacking, especially during a pandemic. We social and games groups. So we do accessible martial arts with Easter seals. That takes place on Wednesdays. And then we do movie nights and anime club on Thursdays. So Thursday afternoons, we will do a movie. Oftentimes it will be disability related, but sometimes not. We have a loyal group of young adults and some slightly older people who enjoy coming to this group, and they'll usually vote on what they want to watch. And we're able to find it and share it over Zoom with everybody. People are able to use the chat feature during the movie and have some talks. And then after the movie, come together for a conversation about what they just saw, what they learned, all of those sorts of things. So it's a really great experience. And it's again, it's for everybody. We have people who come and they're super engaged and they keep their videos on and they're chatting constantly and making friends. And we have other people who come and they shut their video off and they shut their microphone off. They watch the movie. When the movie's over, they leave. That's okay too. It's for everybody. And then anime clubs. Anime club is on Thursday nights. I believe it's at 5 or 5:30 it starts. And they watch anime and they discuss it. There's a group of people that really enjoy anime. It's not my thing. I've been a few times, you know, but I've tried to get into it. Not my thing necessarily, but if it is your thing, or maybe you've heard of anime and you just wanted to check it out and wanted to do so, you know, in an inclusive environment with a bunch of other people who would love to talk to you, you know, we would love to have you. And again, that's anywhere in the state, anywhere in the world really can join via Zoom. Movies, it's something to do, right? Hang out with our staff, chat before, during, after the movie. I think this was a picture from early in the pandemic where we watched Back to the Future. I think they did the whole series of Back to the Future. That was a popular one with people. I think maybe now they're up to like Toy Story 3. I think they're in the Toy Story phase. So we're working our way through those and then we'll move on to something else. But it's always open to input from the people who want to be part of it and want to share what kind of movies they want to watch. And then on Friday, probably our most popular group is our Uno group. It's really popular. We've had a lot of success with people wanting to come online, and we share our screens, and we have a website that we use where people are able to play Uno, and it's proven to be quite popular. So anybody out there interested in playing Uno, we're happy. If we had to get a second or third group going, we're happy to do that. So please, if there are people out there and you don't have those services in your area, you know, send them to us and we'd be happy to work with them. They do not have to be a consumer of ours. We're really just looking to connect to people who could really benefit from that human connection that has been so lacking over this very, very difficult time. And then content creation. So I'm not sure if anybody recognizes this guy, Chris Forsberg. If you are a Celtics fan, you'll see him on the halftime show every game. Some of the other people we talked to, Tony Maserati, he was a writer, I think, for the Herald, and now he works for 98.5 The Sports Hub. We have a video of me and my coworker, Brian, talking to Tony Maz. We also met with Jared Carabas from Barstool Sports. So we have these really cool opportunities to meet these sort of well-known local people in the sports world especially, and to do some content and to get that content out there and to share the virtues of independent living and of Independence Associates. So you can find any of those videos on our YouTube page or on our website. So I would invite you to check those out. And we're always looking for people to help. So if you are somebody out there, or you know somebody who would be interested in helping us to do some of these video things or some of these content creation things, we'd love to talk to you from anywhere in the state or anywhere in the world, really. In front of the camera, if you're looking to be in front of the camera and you want to do a show with Independence Associates, we would love to help you. If you want to work behind the camera, even better. We're always looking for people to help us edit and to do all of those things. And it's a really great way to sort of get into the content creation and media world. And we have a great partnership with Bridgewater Public Access Television, who have been fantastic partners for us. They give us full use of all of their incredible, like, state-of-the-art video studio, television studio, and just help with everything. And they've been really great. So we've been able to make a lot of this content that is airing online, but also around the Commonwealth on various public access stations. So if you see us on your public access station, let us know. We're airing everywhere, all around the state. And it's a great way to make friends and to learn new employable skills. So from talking to Jeff at BTV, I mean, these jobs are in high demand. So if there are people who would be interested in sort of learning or getting into it, no experience necessary, no ability necessary, we are happy to work with whoever we can. If you're from outside of our service area, it'll probably be more limited to online unless you're able to sort of get to Bridgewater. But if you're especially in our area or outside or whatever, you want to be in front of the camera, behind the camera, we would love to have you. And yeah, so that's what we've been doing. We have a bunch of our things online. All of our stuff can be seen on our website. If anything I talked about here sounds interesting, or you have a question, or you're not sure, or whatever, please send an email to social@iacil.org. We are happy to talk to anybody, have a Zoom meeting, or do whatever we can. So just to reiterate, we are out there. Even if you're outside of our service area, or you know somebody outside of our service area, if we can't work with you, we will connect you to somebody who can. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you for having us. I greatly appreciate it. And back to Moss.
And I just wanted to jump in real quick before Moss jumps back on. As the Center for Independent Living, we provide services, and all 10 independent living centers provide services for any person with a disability of any age, regardless of age, regardless of disability. And that's something that the 10 independent living centers across the state have always done. So, so thanks everybody for the opportunity for us to be able to present with you guys today. Back to you, Moss.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you, Ryan and Independence Associates, for your time and flexibility. We appreciate it. Up next, we have Kim Charleston. Just ask that, Kim, you please turn on your camera, and we will give the interpreters a moment to switch. Great. Kim Charleston is the Executive Director of the Perkins Library, and she'll be presenting until noon. We will then take a 5-minute break until 12:05. After the break, we have the National Black Disability Coalition and Spalding Rehabilitation Center presenting for us. Kim today will be presenting on accessible library services for people with disabilities in Massachusetts. Kim, I'd like to now turn it over to you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Moss. And thank you to the Mass Office on Disability, particularly for your flexibility. Wouldn't you know that I would have a major outage of my internet like 15 minutes before my scheduled time. So I really appreciate the flexibility of Independence Associates as well to accommodate me. So I'm very pleased to be here today to talk to you about the Perkins Library, or the Perkins Braille and Talking Book Library. We are the accessible public library for people who cannot read regular print because of a disability. And I'm going to go through what our services are, who's eligible, and just tell you a little bit more about the library and some things that you probably didn't know. So the first thing that I want to tell you is that it is for anyone who has any type of a disability. There often is a conception out there that the services are for people who are blind or visually impaired. And we absolutely do have a very high percentage of people who are blind or visually impaired that we provide services for. However, the eligibility also includes people who have physical disabilities and have difficulty holding a book or turning the pages of a book, or people who have learning or reading disabilities and can't process the visual printed word effectively. So anyone who has a disability is eligible to use our services. So currently, the Perkins Library provides library services for the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and we serve approximately 25,000 people right now who have some type of a disability. Now, we also do provide services to institutions or organizations who support and serve people with disabilities. So that might include an independent living center, a special school or classroom, a rehabilitation center facility, assisted living, or other types of facilities where there may be more than a single individual with a disability. And then the staff in the facilities can use our materials and equipment to work with people with disabilities, introduce our program to them, and then help them to get their own accounts with our library. So how does the library work? You live in Western Massachusetts. You're certainly not going to want to come to Watertown. Well, that is understandable. And our system is really 98% through the mail. We do have some drop-ins when the world was right side up. We had drop-in patrons. Right now we do not, but we can do everything over the phone, over online, or send materials through the mail to individuals' homes directly to their house or to their door, as the title of my presentation says. So what kinds of services do we have? Well, the library, first of all, let me tell you, we have 26 employees. I told you we serve 25,000 people all over the state. From, I believe our youngest reader is 6 months old. That's to use audio to stimulate listening skills at an early age. Our oldest borrower is 109 years old. We have a lot of volunteers who work with us, and in normal days, non-pandemic, we had about 175 volunteers, and about 60 of those work in our recording studio, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So the library has pretty much everything you would expect to find in a public library. However, all of our materials are in a specialized format. So the majority of our materials are in a digital audio format. And that means that it's, you know, in the old days, we used to use cassettes, but we've evolved on beyond cassettes and beyond CDs to something that we call a cartridge. And it's about the size of an audio cassette, if you've ever seen one. And I knew I was getting old when somebody asked me what a cassette was once, and I just kind of said, well, we used to listen to them all the time with our music and books, but so, but a cartridge contains the whole digital book. So those of you who may be familiar with the Talking Book Library or using audiobooks may remember that it often used to involve turning over the tape or changing the CD or that kind of thing. Well, a cartridge, a digital cartridge has, you don't have to turn anything over. You pop it into the player that we loan to you to listen to audiobooks, and the entire book is on that cartridge. So you don't have to flip it, turn it, do anything else once you've put it into the player. So that is hugely convenient. You don't have to worry about which CD is the next CD. The entire book is right there on that cartridge. So we also loan the player to play the digital audiobooks. And the player has been specially designed to meet the needs of all types of people with all types of disabilities. So it's got brightly colored buttons for play and stop and fast forward and rewind, just like an audio player would have. But for somebody with low vision, the colors are helpful. The buttons are very tactile and they're easy to push with any type of, with your fingers, I've seen people push the buttons with their elbow or with mouth sticks. And the cartridge and the slot that you insert a cartridge into was specially designed so that someone not using their hands, but using a mouth stick could leverage the cartridge up and slide it into the player and not have to even touch the cartridge, which is a pretty impressive feat to watch. And I have seen people do this, and it's really incredibly rewarding to see that the machine does work for people who don't have hand dexterity and can't move something with their hands. So the majority of our users listen to our audiobooks. Our collection of audiobooks is pretty diverse and pretty vast. We've got access to almost 250,000 audiobooks, and that would include preschool or kindergarten books for little kids to all kinds of fiction and nonfiction, what you would expect to have access to in a public library. We also have magazines on audio that are available, and over 100 different magazine subscriptions, popular magazines, more specialized magazines, you name it, we probably have access to it. So other formats that we have available for people, we have large print books, which are useful for some folks with visual impairments. And of course, we have Braille books as well. And we have magazines in Braille and a few in large print as well. So we also have audio described DVDs. So these are commercial DVDs that are equipped with the accessibility feature of audio description, which is an additional narration overlaid over the movie, that in the pauses of the dialogue of the movie, you will hear a voice that is telling you what is happening visually, so you can follow along if you can't see the screen and you know what's happening in the movie. So the service is free. It's supported by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts through the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. And then we also are supported by the Perkins School for the Blind, their philanthropy and gifts and grants. So to apply for the library, and I will provide a slide at the end that will have contact information and links to the application online or to the phone numbers as well. So that'll be provided, and I will give out loud the phone number at that time when I'm wrapping up. But the application process is pretty easy. There is a form that needs to be filled out, and it needs to be with all your basic information that you would provide: name, address, phone number, email if you have it, what kinds of things you're interested in reading. That's always helpful. And then there's a spot on the application where it needs to be certified by a professional who can certify that the individual applying for the service does have a disability that makes it difficult for them to read regular print. So that could be a rehab counselor, a clinician, a doctor, a nurse, a librarian, a counselor, pretty much anyone in some kind of professional capacity who can observe that the individual applying for the service does have difficulty reading regular print. So some other conditions, especially for people with physical disabilities, we provide services for are people who have conditions such as Parkinson's disease or MS. Those are fairly typical and have effects that make it difficult to read. And we also provide service to people sometimes who have chronic migraine and they can't read, and they spend a lot of time with their eyes closed resting. And it might be kind of nice to listen to a book, to work your way through a migraine at some point. So the process is pretty easy. Just, complete the application and send it in, and we process it. And again, we also loan the player, so you don't have to purchase anything to use the audiobooks, and you don't need anything extra for the large print or the Braille services or magazines. Now, when you have digital audiobooks, you also have the capability to have books that can be downloaded. So we also have downloadable audiobooks and magazines that you can do. We call the service BARD, Braille and Audio Reading Download. And BARD can be done on a computer, and you can place the audiobooks on a thumb drive and then use our player, because there's a USB port on the side of a player that we loan that you can plug your thumb drive into. Or most people find it much more convenient to use the mobile app that we have for BARD called BARD Mobile. And that's an app that allows you to download audiobooks or magazines. And in some cases, it also allows you to download electronic Braille books that you use with a refreshable Braille device. So BARD Mobile is quite popular. It's, use your iPhone, your smartphone, a tablet to access BARD Mobile. And you can download the books and play them right on that device. So it's pretty easy to do. It's convenient. Most folks already have a smart device of some type. And so we like to connect people with BARD and have them make their choices about what they want. Because when you use BARD Mobile, you're in the control panel, so to speak, and you decide what you want when you want it. BARD Mobile is available 365 days a year, 24/7, so it's always there. And all new books are being added all the time. So there's well over 100,000 audiobooks in our BARD Mobile collection, and more added, like I said, all the time. And a lot of magazines too. So, so that is the materials and the equipment that we provide. I'll talk about some of our other specialized services. We also have a service called Bookshare that we provide to Massachusetts residents. And Bookshare is, again, electronic books and electronic Braille books. The Bookshare service, we sponsor individuals because it is a membership service. So normally you might have to pay up to $50, $60 a year to get access to Bookshare, but the Perkins Library sponsors individuals who use our service to have access to Bookshare. And the Bookshare program has over 950,000 books. These are ebooks, and they can be listened to on any kind of device, a downloadable device as well. So that's a downloadable collection, and pretty vast and pretty impressive as far as what they have available. Textbooks, how-to books, manuals, all kinds of things. I seldom go to Bookshare and don't find an accessible version of a book. So between the collection of the Perkins Library and our partner organization, the National Library Service for the Blind and Print Disabled of the Library of Congress, and Bookshare, we can probably find most of the materials that you would need to access in an accessible format. So let's talk about some of the other things that we provide as well. We have a service called Newsline, and Newsline is, again, computerized access to daily newspapers and magazines. There's over 500 different newspapers from around the country, some international papers as well, and about 4 or 5 newspapers in Spanish. And those are available every day if they're daily newspapers, and it uses text to speech. So it's got a whole choice of about half a dozen different voices that you can select and find the one you like. There's a really nice male voice, a female voice. There's a more like a text to speech voice, a little more robotic, sounds like a talking computer. Some people like that because they're used to using that on their day-to-day work with their computer. So Newsline is very popular, especially if you want to keep up with current news, sports, what's happening in your community. We've got about 14 Massachusetts newspapers on the service, including the Globe and the Herald, the Cape Cod Times, the Patriot Ledger. Our newest acquisition is the Metro West Daily News. The Springfield Republican is on, and so is the Berkshire Eagle, Worcester Telegram, and Gazette as well. So those are just some of the local Massachusetts papers that are part of the Newsline program. The Newsline service also has grocery store flyers. We've heard from our borrowers a lot that they really miss reading advertising. They want to put their grocery list together and they can't read the grocery flyers that come in the mail every week. So we have a collaborative arrangement with the Talking Information Center to get those grocery flyers recorded, and then we post them on Newsline so that people can listen to their particular favorite stores' grocery ads and make their grocery list for their shopping expeditions and save a little money just like everybody else who uses the flyers. One more thing about the Newsline program that I didn't say was there's a variety of ways to use Newsline. And I mentioned that it's text to speech, but I didn't tell you that you access it, the text to speech, using your telephone. Dial up and listen, and for the next article you push 3 and that kind of thing. Very easy to use, not a high-tech kind of service, but there's also a mobile app for Newsline, so you can do it on your smartphone every single day. There's also an online process, and a lot of our borrowers like the online Newsline service because, for example, with the Boston Globe, you can access the Globe and it cleans up the page, so you don't see advertising, you don't see all those forward to a friend, print, email, all that kind of stuff that kind of gets in the way when you want to read the article. It just shows the articles, which makes it much, much easier for people to read it with assistive technology, like magnification for their screen or speech output. So Perkins, we have a recording studio, and it's working on kind of bare bones staff only right now, but we do produce books and some magazines like Yankee, Boston. Those are a couple of the local magazines we produce, and then books for the collection that are not available from any other source. And those books tend to be more local in nature. Let's say books about the Red Sox are quite popular. Any of our sports teams, if there's a book that comes out about any of them, we generally will record it in our studio because we know people want to read about their sports heroes and their sports teams. So we do that and make that accessible as well. Other assistive technology that we loan to people, CCTVs or video magnifiers, which are the TVs that enlarge the print so you can read it more easily. We have a loan program where we place CCTVs with individuals who qualify for our services and could benefit from having a CCTV. And that's a kind of a first come, first serve basis program. It generally doesn't have a long wait list, but it might have a wait list of 4 to 6 weeks if we don't have any equipment available. So, and we operate that program with donated equipment from families whose maybe the individual can no longer see well enough to read the CCTV screen, but they want to make sure that the equipment benefits others. So they donate it to our library and we continue to make that equipment useful for others, which is great. We have a Perkins Brailler loan program for people, maybe their brailler is broken. And in companion with that, we also have a Perkins Brailler repair program for Massachusetts residents. If they have a broken Perkins Brailler that they use, it's their personal device, we will fix it one a year. So if somebody's brailler isn't working, we can help them to get it back up and running. The website for the Perkins Library, we have an online catalog. So if anybody wanted to just go look and browse through to see what our collection has to offer, we can do that as well through the online catalog. And you don't have to be a borrower to actually look at the online catalog. You can go online and just browse it. But if you want to go into our online catalog and actually send yourself a book, which you can do, you have a username and a password that we provide through the library once you're set up. We have accessible reference services. We have accessible children's services and a summer reading program for kids who are part of our program. We also have books in other languages. We have a lot of books in Spanish, and then most other languages less, but we do have access to many books in other languages. Now to talk about the last program I'm going to talk to you about today. This is a new program that's just started since the pandemic came along. We call it our Telefund Zoom room. And we have what we discovered shortly after we went into the pandemic a year ago was the increased need for our borrowers to have some kind of contact with the library and with others. The isolation was really tough on them. They didn't have anything to do, nowhere to go, nothing to really kind of keep them going. And there was depression and just a lot of stuff was going on. And I know many of you have had similar experiences, and just like the Independence Associates folks mentioned some of their programming that's come along since the pandemic. So our Telefund Zoom activities include a lot of different opportunities. We discovered what a great tool Zoom could be for connecting our patrons with one another and with our library. So we have programming that you would see at a public library. We have a Library Without Walls program, which is a speaker series where we invite authors to come in, present to our patrons, and then they have an opportunity to ask questions, just like a book talk at a public library. We have Teaching Tuesdays, which is a couple times a month. We'll have presenters who talk about maybe some type of assistive technology or how to use streaming services and get audio description on your programming when you're using a streaming service, or accessible televisions and how to access audio description for television, other kinds of reading programs and how to use virtual assistants to do all kinds of things. They're a great tool. So that's our Teaching Tuesday program, and it's very popular. We also have Monday matinee movies, where we'll run an audio described movie and let our patrons come in and have that fun experience. We are doing a few other programs, kind of a listening library, old time radio, dramas, more contemporary audio dramas as well. And a couple of our newer programs are, we have a yoga class twice a month that's over Zoom, and we have a certified blind yoga instructor who works with all of our patrons who come to Zoom and is very descriptive. It's modified yoga. She talks them through all the movements, and the class is just doing really well. And the people who are in it are really having a good time. And we also have accessible bingo that we do over Zoom twice a month in the Friday evenings. And that's a lot of fun and very popular. People, get prizes just like you do with bingo. So they're having a lot of fun. The boards are Braille and raised large print so that anybody can access them tactily or visually if they need to do that.
Excuse me, Kim, I just want to let you know, we just do need to wrap up for the break,
Thank
please.
you. I was saying I should have given you a hint to give me a reminder. So I'm just going to close now with the contact information for the library. So I think a slide will be up. You can reach the Perkins Library at 617-972-7240 or 1-800-852-3133. And our website is perkinslibrary.org. And you can reach me if you have questions, and I'm sure Moss and his team will forward any questions on to me that you might have had, and I'll be happy to follow up with any of you. Thank you for the opportunity to share the Perkins Library with all of you today.
Thank you so much, Kim. So right now the time is 12:05. We will take a 5-minute break and return at 12:10. We have 2 fantastic presentations left to wrap up our summit from the National Black Disability Coalition and Spalding Rehabilitation Center. So again, please return at 12:10 p.m. Thank you so much. All right, everyone, we're going to get started again. Just want to make sure that our ASL interpreters are ready. Great. Welcome back, everybody, from our break. Our next presenter is Tamika Kitchen-Spruce. Please prepare your presentation and turn on your camera.
Okay. It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Great. Give me 1 second. I'll fix that for you.
Okay.
Perfect. So Tamika will be presenting today on unfinished business working in the Black community by the National Black Disability Coalition. Tamika is a disability justice activist and a member of the National Black Disability Coalition. Welcome, Tamika, and I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. So, again, my name is Tamika Citrus Bruce. I'm happy to be here today with all of you. So, going to start my presentation. I'm sorry, hold on 1 second. So I get started. Okay. So again, I'm here on behalf of National Black Disability Coalition. So I'll talk about our work that we do in the Black community. A little bit about myself. I'm a disability justice activist and filmmaker. I've been advocating for over 15 years for, for various these disability related, advocating for like affordable, accessible housing, fight against voting oppression towards people with disabilities. I advocated for ending racial and gender injustices and health equity. I'm a community organizer for Warriors on Wheels and a production assistant for Healthy Dearborn. I also do some work with the Michigan Disability Rights Coalition on Black disabled issues. And I'm also a proud member of the National Black Disability Coalition. And I'm also a wife and mother of 2 children. So again, I'm here to speak about on the behalf of MBDC. So a little bit, this is a picture of me, brown skin with brown hair. And this is the background, the accomplishments of African Americans with disabilities and the disability movement. And then there's another picture of me, brown skin, and then my 2 friends, Lisa Franklin and Jamie, who's also Black women in a wheelchair. And then standing up is Jane Dunham, the executive producer, the executive director of the National Black Disability Coalition. So a little bit history of the National Black Disability Coalition. And so initially started in the 80s and the 90s for the Administration on Developmental Disabilities. They had like several national conferences on race and disabilities. And as a result of these conferences, several grassroots Black organizations were formed. Unfortunately, none of them are around today, but out of that came the National Black Disability Coalition. So for all those coalitions that was happening through the 80s and 90s, MBDC is what we have left from that. And Ms. J said to me that there were 2 problems that was happening at the time, why it disbanded. Some of it was the first of the organization expected the administration to make real financial commitments to them. And when that did not happen, the organizations did not have enough money to funding to sustain themselves. So like I said, this was what was happening in the 80s and 90s really paved the way for MBDC right now. So from the next phase that was happening, that you had the New Jersey Black Disability Coalition. And so that began in 2000. And so MBDC was a spinoff from the New Jersey Black Disability Coalition. The New Jersey Coalition worked for 10 years before going national. It was during the work of the National Coalition that Leroy Moore, which is another co-founder, joined on. And so Leroy kind of started his own thing in California with Miss Jane in the Bay Area. So that's when was now NBDC, but then it was just a New Jersey Black Coalition, started extending their work nationally. And it started in also in the Bay Area. So NBDC is a national organization. Anyone across the country can benefit from our services. This is Ms. Jane Dunham, again, Executive Director. She is a light-skinned woman with gray hair and hazel eyes. Has a really pretty smile in the picture. So she says that work of NBDC includes Black disabled people and their families from all disability groups, in particular Black disabled people who are at the least of us in the disability community that is poor, and families, and quite often middle-class families who know very little about disability services or rights. For Black families, the introduction to disability is a new conversation. And so we really like to emphasize that disability, is something that's, of course, personal, but there's also social and political as well. So the mission of the NBDC is that, our goals is to promote unity among Black people with disabilities, our families, our communities, to advance equity within the disability movement in our communities, and to foster opportunity for Black people with disabilities. We believe that Black people with disabilities must unite to obtain and secure the rights and the privileges of full participation in communities, using strategies from the civil rights movement. NBDC seek to achieve collective power and inclusion for Black people with disabilities within our families, faith organizations, and the greater disability community. Again, so the work include, Black disabled people and their families. So they already kind of reread, already said that before, but, we just put an emphasis again on, of the least of these in our community, which is poor people, families, and individuals with disabilities, and also middle class families who may not know what kind of services there are out there. So our work assists over 20 years. So some of the things that we've done is gave presentations on prison reform for rights and services for Black disabled inmates. We have drafted and introduced and successfully passed into law a bill that required the state of New Jersey to do annual assessments of the needs and services of Black disabled people and their families. We acted as fiscal fiduciaries on the ADA lawsuit for Black disabled individuals. We provided internships. We developed a toolkit for Black faith and nonprofit organizations. We did like a network of Black disabled organizations. So we're doing like a lot of different things. Another example of our work besides, what we do as an organization, we also support, Black organizations and activists. So we support organizations like Atlanta Disability in Action, headed by Reverend Kelvin Peterson. Also Divas with Disabilities Project, headed by Dr. Donna Walton. Also Detroit Warriors on Wheels, which I'm a part of, which is headed by Lisa Franklin. Also Crip Hop Nation, headed by Leroy Moore. So that's just a little bit of, the organizations and individuals that we support. Also, like people like myself, individual activists, they supported me in various different ways. The first time I knew about, was introduced to NBDC is when I was asked to do a presentation on African Americans with disabilities, the history of that for Eastern Michigan University. So that was, one of the things that's how I was introduced to NBDC, and that was in 2018. So also we support other activists like Teresa Turbin as well, and many others. So some of our work during COVID-19, there are many Black people in America who have disabilities and chronic illnesses. African Americans have one of the highest percentage of disabilities in America. So that has a detrimental effect that disproportionately, and please excuse my error on there, but disproportionate rate of Black people who have died also from the coronavirus. So some of the things that we've done or doing is we have a memorial of Black people with disabilities who have died by COVID-19. Also, despite the hardships, we, influenced American, culture. So, we like to emphasize that too, is the resilience in our communities. And there's many great examples of that. Another thing that we are doing is, if you know anybody that is a Black youth with a disability and that's a senior, currently right now, we're giving away two scholarships, $10,000 scholarships for higher education. So if you would like a scholarship application, please go to it. You'll have access to this slide, but go to www.blackdisability.org, and that's where you'll see a tab where you can click on scholarships. And the deadline is coming up soon. So it's March 15th, and it needs to be mailed in. So as long as the application is postmarked by March 15th, then it will be accepted. And so you just need to fill out application, do an essay, and have two references from individuals in the community just to support the youth and vouch for them. So this is a great opportunity for our Black youth who are seniors. So some of the things that we have helped with that came on is, and I'm not gonna read all of these, but I'm gonna read the first one. A lady came in and said, I have a mental illness. I need some help getting an attorney for abuse. I am not seeking treatment. I currently see a psychologist and psychiatrist on a monthly basis. So, we get various, notification emails, calls, those type of things for assistance. So we can help people with disabilities and their families on whatever issue that you may, have. So please reach out to us with whatever is occurring, and we'll try our best to help you. And like I said, it's for individuals and families. So if it's like a parent or with a child with a disability, or a caregiver, or a family member, we're here to help. So if there's any questions, you can go to blackdisability.org, and there's a contact us page, so you can send us questions that way. And I also will put my email, personal email in the chat. So you can email me your questions, and I'll make sure to get it to Jane Dunham to answer them. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Tamika. And thank you to the National Black Disability Coalition for all of your hard work in the community. I would like to give our interpreters a moment to switch. Great. Our next presenter is Dr. Sherry Blauett. Please prepare your presentation. Dr. Blauett is the Director of Disability Access and Awareness, as well as a physician at Spalding Rehabilitation Network. She will be presenting today on promoting health during a global pandemic with a focus on physical activity and health equity. Welcome, Dr. Blauett. You may begin.
Thank you very much, Moss. And thank you to the Mass Office on Disability for the opportunity to present today. Also, many thanks to Tamika. I thought that was a fantastic presentation, and really just so appreciate all the work that you are doing to lead in this intersectional space on the disability community. So thank you for that. So as Moss introduced, my name is Dr. Sherry Blauett. I currently am a practicing clinician based within the Spalding Rehab Network, as well as the Brigham and Women's Hospital. I do some research focused on the impact of physical activity for people with disabilities. And importantly, and pertinent to today's presentation, I serve as Director of Disability Access and Awareness for the Spalding Rehabilitation Network. For today, what I'm going to focus on is two primary areas. The first is outlining the work that Mass General Brigham has done as a healthcare system to promote disability and health equity through the COVID pandemic and the lessons learned from that work. And I'm also going to provide an introduction and some insight into how we have thought about the importance of accessing physical activity and sport during the pandemic, and the pivot to online opportunities and how that's really sort of set a new course for the future as it relates to adaptive sports. Related to health equity framework. So I know that everyone on this session today, of course, understands that disability is very diverse and highly intersectional. So according to the CDC, 40% of adults over 65 years old have disabilities, and 1 in 4 African Americans have disabilities. And we see those similar trends across other elements of race, ethnicity as well. And of course, we know that people with disabilities are more likely to experience the impact of the social determinants of health or various socioeconomic disadvantages. And we've all seen it, I think, in so many ways, but the pandemic has led to challenges that are intersecting and very complex, related to factors of increased personal health risk for individuals who may have background medical and health conditions that put them at increased risk of either acquiring the virus or having a poor outcome. Certainly exacerbation of factors related to the social determinants of health. So for example, unstable housing or loss of employment relating to further financial stressors. And of course, all these things ultimately impact health and access to health care. People have had difficulty in accessing routine healthcare services. So it's not just COVID testing and the vaccine, but it's also simply being able to see your primary care doctor and your specialists, and being able to access the care that you need to maintain health through the pandemic. And this has been difficult for many people. Of course, we know there's been disruptions to home and community-based care, unstable access to PCAs, for example, and many challenges in this arena. And of course, a lot of concerns around things like crisis standards of care and care rationing that have disproportionately impacted the disability community. And interestingly, a lot of the public health policies that have been put into place to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 have had unintended consequences for the disability community. I'm going to run through some of them here. And this is a table that outlines some of the primary points. For example, policies related to social distancing, we know have created difficulties in obtaining the necessary in-home supports and hands-on care that many people need in the community. Also difficulty accessing outpatient services, like for example, physical therapy, and being able to receive the hands-on care you need in order to benefit from rehabilitation. Of course, it's led to communication difficulties for the people who rely on tactile cues in order to communicate. Stay-at-home orders have certainly, I think, increased the risk of loneliness and mental health symptoms for people across the board, but certainly disproportionately impacting people with disabilities. We've seen, unfortunately, an increased risk of factors related to things like domestic abuse, difficulty obtaining medications and durable medical equipment or other essential goods and services. The closure of health clinics and migration of many services to telemedicine has reduced barriers for many people with disabilities, particularly related to physical disability and mobility related disability, but it's also increased barriers for others. For example, individuals with cognitive, intellectual, or sensory disability, and in many cases, telemedicine platforms not being yet fully universally accessible. Closure of other essential businesses, of course, has led to, unfortunately, loss of employment and meaningful income for many people, further exacerbating all those challenges related to the social determinants of health. And we know that universal mask policies, although required for community safety and public health, have created some increased challenges for people with disabilities who rely on lip reading or use of facial expressions to communicate. And also, there has been across the board a lack of guidance regarding strategies that can still promote the health and safety of individuals who can't tolerate using a mask because of the presence of a disability, for example, sensory disability related to autism spectrum disorder or PTSD, as two examples. So all of these challenges, certainly came to our attention early in the spring of 2020 and into the summer. And it became very clear that we needed to mobilize a response across our healthcare system in order to ensure that all of the services that we're providing related to COVID-19, but also baseline primary care and specialty services would be equitable and still accessible to the disability community. So we did develop a disability and health equity framework and really came together as a system for the first time and really brought down a lot of silos in order to create the conversation that needed to happen to be responsive to meet the needs of the community. The three pillars of the framework included looking at universal access of our hospitals and facilities, what was happening in terms of the response at the community level, and also engaging in advocacy at the city, state, and federal level. As it relates to universal access, I'm going to highlight just some of the things that were carried forward. So at the start of the pandemic, the challenge related to universal masks came up very quickly, of course. And across Metro North Brigham, we were able to acquire a large supply of transparent face masks and work with our disability task force to ensure that these were procured and supplied to all of our partner hospitals across the system, both inpatient and outpatient settings. And of course, this has been very important to being able to provide equitable care. We developed a clinician tip sheet for basic competencies regarding communicating with patients with disabilities that could be provided to our physicians and nurses in the ICU, for example, or in the emergency rooms, where there may not be as much inherent knowledge and exposure to working with the disability community, but we know that people are accessing care. And even in those acute care environments, we have to communicate respectfully. We looked through all of our COVID policies and procedures to include our visitor policy and universal mask policy, and did everything that we could to adjust or edit the language to reflect the importance of accommodations and to reduce the risk of bias on the basis of disability. And as our upcoming priorities, we're continuing to work on looking at the virtual visit or telemedicine workflow and other IT solutions that we know are going to be so important into the future, given how healthcare is, as we speak, being transformed by our response to the virus. This is a very busy slide. I'm just going to explain what it is. Essentially, this is the algorithm that was developed for use at our hospitals to determine what we could do and how we could be as accommodating as possible for individuals with disabilities who couldn't tolerate use of a face mask for health reasons or because of their disability. And we made this as basic and simple and straightforward as possible, so that if you are a clinic manager, for example, at an outpatient facility, and you may not be, have a lot of exposure to disability culture and cultural competence around disability, that you at least knew what you could ask and what you should be thinking about related to mask use. So at the top, you see that if someone asks for an exemption from wearing a mask, we simply ask them, is there a reason? If it's not related to disability, then we still ask that they follow the universal mask policy. But if it is related to disability, then we can ask, does your disability affect your ability to wear a mask, and how? And would use of an alternative mask, such as a transparent mask, make it more tolerable to use a mask? If it's determined that the patient can't tolerate using a mask, then we look at things like the environment where they are receiving care, what the level of risk is, and what the individual needs are. And on the bottom right here, you'll see that there's a listing of other accommodations that can be used in order to still maintain safety for both the patient as well as for others in their environment, even if they can't use a mask. So things like having the patient travel through a less populated area of the hospital to their destination, or alerting department staff so that they could put the patient directly into a clinic room rather than having them wait in a busy waiting area. Potentially consulting with the provider to consider whether the in-person visit could be transitioned to a virtual visit if appropriate. And we also note here the importance of offering assistance with putting a face mask on and taking it off, which of course is important for individuals who have limited upper extremity mobility or limited dexterity. As it relates to the visitor policy, we were very explicit and tried to do a lot of education across our system regarding the difference between a visitor, like a family member, or a non-essential visitor, between a support person for a patient with a disability, and raising awareness regarding the fact that we actually have an obligation to enable designated support people to accompany a person with a disability to their appointment, or as an inpatient, for example. And this took a lot of work because, of course, it's not immediately clear, like, how you determine a visitor versus a support person. So this is just a screenshot of the fact sheet that we developed, and the fact sheet itself is much longer, but it basically outlines the key distinction between the two and what our obligations are to enable a designated support person to be able to enter the facility and accompany the patient if needed. Related to local, state, and federal advocacy, we were involved in the Massachusetts Crisis Standards of Care Working Group. I was able to serve on that group along with several other leaders in the community, including Colin Killick from the DPC. And we were able to work with the group through the fall when the revisions were being looked at in order to, revise the language and do everything possible to reduce the risk of bias towards people with disabilities in medical decision-making in a crisis environment. We've been involved with the City of Boston's Mayor's Task Force on Health Equity to ensure that we're thinking about those intersectional aspects of race and disability as it relates to both the COVID response, but also in the development of a new strategic plan called Health Equity Now. And also supporting efforts at the federal level and doing everything we can to ensure that disability data is being collected alongside data related to race and ethnicity, as well as other factors in the COVID response. And this is something that still needs far more work. But data is incredibly important to demonstrate what's happening in the community and to demonstrate the impact that COVID is having on the community. So this is something that we're still actively pushing for. Currently, because that push is ongoing at the city, state, and federal level, we are doing everything we can at Mass General Brigham to optimize disability data collection. And we've pulled together a disability data working group to think about how do we best capture this information at the time when one registers as a patient or when they book up an appointment, and trying to look at this question from the standpoint of disability identity, as well as accommodations and health literacy considerations. And currently working on optimizing the list of possible accommodations that are available to patients so that when someone registers, they can be asked about whether they self-identify as a person with a disability, but then also what accommodations might be needed. And that can then be documented in the medical records so that we know in advance of what people will need so that we can provide the best, highest quality of care possible. So next, I wanted to talk about the innovative work that we've been doing at the Spalding Rehab Network regarding adaptive sport and access to sport and physical activity through the pandemic. We know that physical activity is really important. This is a figure from the CDC, from a vital signs report that was published in 2014, where they looked at access to sport and physical activity for people with disabilities across the country, as well as disparities, health disparities related to not engaging in physical activity and the impact of sedentary lifestyles. And I think this report was really informative. This is just one screenshot of one of the figures. It notes that nearly half of adults with disabilities get no aerobic physical activity, and they are 50% more likely to report at least one chronic disease than active adults with disabilities. So that's an important fact, just noting that if you have a disability, physical activity matters in terms of chronic disease prevention, and obviously promoting and doing everything you can to protect your own personal health into the future. So we know that physical activity is important. We know that people need to be moving in order, for their own health. And because of that, we've done a lot at Spalding to think about how to make physical activity equitable and accessible to the community. There are a lot of barriers. This is a figure from a study that was published actually back in 2008, so it's a little bit old, but I think it's informative. And this simply surveyed people with disabilities about what were their barriers to engaging in physical activity. And coming in at the top of that list were things like cost of the program, or not knowing where to go to engage in exercise, not having adequate transportation, or not having the sort of knowledge and expertise to know how to engage in physical activity opportunities. And I think this is important to see, because if you look here, you'll note that the things coming in at the top 4 are all things that are modifiable and things that we can make an impact on in the community, thinking about reducing costs or providing more information about where these programs exist, et cetera. And so, important to note that we can really make a difference. So Spalding Adaptive Sports Centers was launched actually many years ago, but has recently expanded to be inclusive of programming, not only in Boston, but also across the North Shore and the South Shore, and even down into Cape Cod. And this is really focused on integrating sports and recreation as a tool for not only rehabilitation, but also integration and community participation for everyone under that lens of universal design. We have opportunities that are competitive, like sled hockey, for example, as well as individually based exercise opportunities like indoor fitness, yoga, aerobics, et cetera, as well as a lot of opportunities for outdoor recreation. So things like water sports and rock climbing and equestrian and so on and so forth. This is a listing of the programs that are currently offered. And as you can see, it's quite comprehensive, and we really tried to design the program in a way that, regardless of your interest, there's something for everyone. Whether you're more so into the outdoors and want to try archery or air rifle, or if you're, have a need for speed, right, and you want to try some hand cycling, or the SPRINT program, which is a running program for individuals who have experienced a stroke. So there really is something for everyone, and we're pretty proud of this. And a lot of these programs of note are also run via community partnerships, where we do our best to really network with the community to understand what other groups are offering as well, so that we're cross-referencing and building upon what's available in the community, rather than duplicating resources or creating competing programs and working in silos, which of course would be counterproductive. So the program has been going on for many years, but in March of 2020, we really had to do a rapid pivot to think about how to continue to offer these opportunities in a virtual environment. And in mid-March, over the course of about 1 to 2 weeks, we actually completely revamped the program and looked across all of the sports opportunities and thought about, which of these could be offered via online platforms or virtual formats. And we were able to expand into 23 different types of sessions, including things like one-on-one individual fitness training, where a client can work directly with an instructor via an online platform. Virtual activities, for example, group fitness classes, yoga, etc., as well as hybrid activities that had both in-person and virtual components. And we were able to carry the hybrid programs out, particularly over the summer when the weather was nice, when we could have, for example, a hand cycle spin class in an outdoor environment where we were still able to maintain safety and social distancing, but help people to get some good fresh air and to at least interact to some extent with their peers. The service area has, moving to this virtual platform has really enabled us to extend outside of even Greater Boston and New England, and now recruit clients and get people involved from across the whole US, which is actually one major silver lining of moving to this type of programming, is that if you're a person with a disability living in a fairly rural area, for example, now you can access virtual adaptive sports and still have that exposure and that opportunity to engage in physical activity with your peers, which I think is so fantastic and of course so important. So here are just some images. The top picture is one of our virtual pump classes, where you can see people with different types of disabilities coming to the table to be a part of the class. We've been able to run over 1,000 sessions with 5,000 participants and 240 unique participants. So 240 individuals engaging, and of course, many of them engaging on multiple different occasions. We were able to write up an academic manuscript about this and have it published in the journal Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation. And this has gotten a lot of good feedback because we tried to write the article in a way that provided people with a how-to guide of building similar programs within their environment in different places across the country. This is one of the figures from the paper that really talks about the phases of implementing a virtual adaptive sports program. Everything from the preparatory phase to setting things up and what you really need to think about in order to do this securely and safely via an online platform, what you need to do to prepare for a class, as well as how to run the class itself. So nice again, sort of how-to guide. We've noticed that in pivoting to a virtual adaptive sports programming, that recruitment looks a little bit different. So for example, the virtual program, we've been able to recruit more robustly from emails coming from the adaptive sports program, as well as social media. Because again, everyone's at home, everyone's on their computer all the time. So these methods of recruitment have been quite helpful. For the more traditional in-person programming that previously existed, the main source of referrals was from people's therapists themselves, who would get to know a patient, and then as they get to know them, say, hey, I think adaptive sports would be a great opportunity for you. Are you interested? So we've just noticed that with the virtual programming that the recruitment methods have changed a little bit, which of course is very helpful to know for the future. And if we look at outcomes of the traditional versus virtual program and what people are reporting in terms of their flexibility, strength, endurance, balance, emotional domains like confidence, self-esteem, and mood, really across the board, we've seen that there's not a lot of difference in client satisfaction between the two programs, and that the satisfaction scores are just as high with the virtual program as they were for the traditional in-person program, which of course tells us a lot in terms of the importance of keeping these opportunities available moving forward. Wanted to end with a note about some of the other areas where we're active within Spalding Adaptive Sports. We do have an adaptive sports medicine clinic, which is meant to diagnose and develop treatment plans for athletes with disabilities who may acquire typical sports injuries, things like tendonitis or muscle injury, or for individuals who may want additional assistance and guidance regarding things like fitting their adaptive sports equipment appropriately, or what type of adaptive sports equipment might be the best option for them. So if you're at all interested in this, or if you know of anybody interested in the community, please let us know. My contact information, I'll put it up at the end of the talk, but this is really, I think, a fantastic opportunity to work with individuals who are active in order to keep them healthy and moving as they engage in adaptive sports over time. We also run the Kelly Adaptive Sports Research Institute, which is utilizing research to develop and enhance adaptive sports opportunities. And we do this in a way where we're looking at participant-centered collaborative research and looking at outcomes to better understand, what is the impact of adaptive sports and how does it impact things like confidence, a feeling of integration into the community, personal, physical health, mental health, all these different indicators that we know are important broadly for anyone engaging in sports and physical activity, and certainly also important for the disability community. The research work has two primary arms, community-based and elite. The community-based program is really the Kelly Institute, where we're able to use research to think about how do we best match participants to the right program to ensure that they sustain their participation, and then what are the outcomes of that participation. But then we also have involvement on the elite side, working with Paralympic athletes and doing some longitudinal monitoring of sports-related injuries to understand what are the unique injury patterns for athletes with disabilities, and therefore, how can we think about injury prevention programs. So with that, I'll end. Again, many thanks to the Mass Office on Disability. Just really appreciate the invitation to share our work. Of course, to all of my colleagues at the Spalding Rehab Network and Mass General Brigham. And email is here. If anyone has any questions I'd like to follow up with, always happy to be in touch. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mcleod. And I just ask that you please put your email address also in the chat if you don't mind.
No problem.
Thank you. Well, thank you to Dr. Sherry Blauett for your presentation to Spalding Rehabilitation Center. Thank you to all of our fantastic presenters today. We really appreciate your time. We wholeheartedly appreciate that you can be here and give time up out of your busy day. A huge thank you to our Mass Office on Disability staff and our Summit Planning Committee who helped make this entire event possible. We've had an entire team of staff behind the scenes today, running everything, the question and answers in the chat and calling presenters and helping attendees and standing by. So without them, this would not be possible. So thank you so much. Thank you to the New England ADA Center for assisting in grant funding to ensure that we can continue to host our annual summit. And they were the ones who presented today, Stacy and Jason. It's their organization with Kathy Gibson, O.C. Harrison, and Valerie. We appreciate your time. Thank you to all of our CART and ASL interpreters. And thank you to each and every one of you for attending today. We do wish you all good health and happiness and appreciate taking time out of your day to be here. I would like to turn it over to Mary in one moment. So Mary, could you please turn on your camera? While Mary is presenting, I will post a slide with our contact information. And in the chat, I will also post information for our Twitter, our YouTube, our main line, and information to access the summit agenda and slides. In a few days, we'll also be sending you an email with a link to the recording, as well as all the documentation that we've discussed today. So in closing, again, I'd like to say thank you very much. And now I'd like to turn it over to our Executive Director, Mary Mahan-McCauley. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Moss. What a fabulous day. I know that I have so many things to do. I have to find out about rock climbing and go to a movie with Perkins. And there was a lot of information that I learned that was new for me. It was really wonderful. Thank you to all of the presenters for helping us to make this day a success. And of course, thank you, Moss, and every staff person at Mass Office on Disability. I really do. I really feel blessed and fortunate to be the executive director of an agency where people truly care. And there has been a lot of work behind the scenes for the planning and execution of today to make sure that it worked out well. Thanks for all the entire audience. We are glad that you joined us today, and please stay tuned for all future events that we'll have. Goodbye, everyone, and stay healthy and safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you to everyone. That concludes our 6th Annual Disability Summit. I appreciate all of your time. Everyone, please stay healthy and have a great day. Thank you.